Okay, I'd like to call this meeting to order. Before we begin, I would like to acknowledge that we're privileged to meet on the Stalo unceded traditional territory of Puyallup, Chilliwack, and Samath. With this acknowledgement, we recognize the unique relationship the Stalo people have to the land on which we do our jobs. All right, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda, please? Trustee Reed, seconded by Trustee Swanky. Are there any questions, additions to the agenda? Trustee Maws.
Thank you. I actually have a point of privilege. The summary of this agenda contains a statement from the board concerning censuring me with attached punitive measures. This is the first official statement that I have received from this board. I've never been informed of the motion, the decision, the action, nor the punitive measures this board has chosen to take against me. I am requesting the minutes from the last in-camera meeting that details the action this board has taken.
There's been a point of order.
This was a point of privilege, which supersedes the point of order.
I don't think it does. Just what was your point of order?
It's actually incorrect. She left the meeting.
I agree, but I'm gonna let Trustee Moss finish her statement.
Thank you. So further, I would like to point out that this board does not abide by its own processes as outlined in the Code of Conduct. The first censure was done illegally according to our own policies.
No, we're not doing. Trustee Moss, you're out of order.
The second censure.
Trustee Moss, you're out of order.
Article on a practice. The third censure.
Trustee Moss, you're out of order. If you cannot stop, I'm going to call a recess and we will take the time. Okay, I'd like to call this meeting back to order. All right, so we're moving on. I am not acknowledging what was being said, and you were called out of order 3 times. If you persist in disrupting the meeting, I'll ask you to leave the meeting. All right, so we are moving on to all those in favor of adopting the agenda as circulated. Opposed? That motion carries. On to a motion to approve the minutes, please. Trustee Swanky, seconded by Trustee Bondar. Are there any errors or omissions in the minutes? Seeing none, all those in favor of approving the meetings as circulated? That's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, moving on to our presentation, which is 2.1, transportation update. Update. Anyways, 2024-2025 planning. This is our facilities manager.
So I'm just borrowing the presenter's mic for this, so thank you so much while Kirk is getting this ready. I will say it. We have a short presentation for you this evening. Only 6 slides, so that's good. While that's happening, a big acknowledgement. There was a ton of hard work put behind this. So just share a little bit about, we did have, as you'll see in the slide, we did have a bit of a rough start at the beginning of the year. There was a huge amount of work done by staff from the board office, staff from transportation, facilities. It was a very concerted effort. So, thank you so much. So if we go to the first slide, looking at our strategic plan, so we fit into the operations of this with our focus. Transportation is reliable, safe service for getting students to and from school. And the next slide. As I started to mention, we did have a rough start of the year. We had several things that we'd run into, and we'll get into that in further slides. But a note here is 1 or 2 isn't too bad, but when you start to accumulate several at the same time, it becomes very challenging, and that's exactly what we ran into. So what we heard in September as we were working through this is the bus passes were delayed, some bus routes not available, payment fees were complicated, and responses were delayed. And I'll expand on those as we get into it. So thinking around bus pass procurement was delayed. It was really due to complications in receiving the passes. The bus route creation was delayed, and that was around late registrations. So the bold are the areas that we worked on. So as you see those bolded areas, that's where we focused our attention. Payment system had some technical difficulties. It was a little bit difficult to manage on the web page. And then transportation was collecting bus fees, which was also taking time. We were in the middle of some significant staff shortages throughout all the drivers, dispatch, reception, so we were struggling there. And that generated a high volume of calls, a high volume of concerns, which also was slowing us down as we were trying to get all of these pieces together. The next one. So the enhancements that are made, as we learn, bus passes, procurement things, I'm sure everyone is finding at times can be delayed. So our passes we're ordering a year ahead so that we have an inventory ready to go. So our bus passes for 24-25 are sitting in transportation ready to go. We started to encourage early registration, and that was a small way, but it was turned out to be really effective. Thinking about the $25 registration, if you were able to register before, I have to check my dates here. So if you were February to May, there was no charge, so the $25 fee was waived. June was $50, July was $75. So again, thinking about as you move toward those dates, let's save the dollars and get that registration in sooner. At the same time, we continued our iPad giveaway. So we started a few years ago. Early registrations went into a draw for an iPad, and then we presented an iPad to the student. And that's still been positive, and we're still using that. Creating the bus fee incentive we talked about a little bit. Creating an automated registration system was one of the key components. One of the conversations we had at the table is I'm able to book a flight pretty much anywhere in a few minutes, but it takes me a lot of time to book a bus, and I'm doing it every year. So working again with the board office staff, we were able to tap into the registrations that are there, able to create an automated system. So if you have a student that you've been going through the busing system, and that as you start that registration, it auto-populates for you. It also auto-populates. We're making an expectation that you live in the same place and you're going to the same school. We also know that you may have moved if you're moving from elementary to middle to high, we would know that. So those things were auto-populating, and we're saying, please confirm. So instead of having to step through every part, it's more of an auto-population, and also just please confirm. So if there is changes, then obviously we do need more information, but that saved a significant amount of time. So collection of fees and time barrier around payment fees. So transportation is not a collection fee company. They're really built on getting students to schools, and they were doing that work. And so collecting fees was a bit different for them. The other part was we were collecting fees, confirming fees before we would step further with the registration. So by tying that to the student fees, it took that out of transportation's hands, literally took that out of their hands, and they could just do the job that they do well. So all of those things are helping us to build and finalize routes much faster. We also took on a campaign to hire more drivers. And actually through this process, the community was very supportive. And as we were reaching out, there was many times community was coming back and saying, we know somebody, or how do we apply? So we were able to see quite an increase in our driver applications and get those drivers through. And we're still continuing that. We have another driver course coming in 3 weeks, so we continue to work on that. And to the point now where we're at, we have a driver for every run, and we have casuals that can fill those positions. So that's been very helpful. Another piece, as we talked about, is we're a growing district. Transportation had not seen any staffing increases in quite a time. So we've added a clerical position. That position allows dispatch to be building routes where clerical can do the support clerical needs to do, and allows for dispatch and those teams to be doing the work they need to be doing. Also, we have more buses, so we are able to add a mechanic position to that team as well, which has greatly improved the work the team can do. And then next slide. So the good news is, as we went through this, the first day we opened, keep in mind we registered just over 4,000 students. And the first day, within, I think it was less than 6 hours, we had 890 registrations come in, and I did not receive a call saying this was a difficult process. Transportation had the same. We actually had some very positive feedback saying this was much better. Today, currently, we're sitting at just over 2,500 registrations, which is a record for us. We've never seen that type of numbers. And what it's allowing us to do is build those routes. So different from a city route that has a pickup located at a certain spot, we build the route and set the pickup by where the students are, right, to make it more efficient. We have a very short period of time to move 4,000 students. So we are already building routes. Then this is very early for us. We're going to be, again, continuing more messaging out, reminders, and you still have an opportunity to save a few dollars. So I think that's been, it's been very successful. The other piece we're adding around is a frequently asked question. So we're building that as we go. So as parents come in with questions, we're going to add that to the website. So we'll answer the question, we'll add it to the website. A lot of times, I go onto websites and I see that where there's a frequently asked question. It's like, oh yeah, that's my question. So hopefully we can help, respond quicker with those. And with the added clerical position, that's going to help with our phone calls that we were struggling with previously. So I don't know, Simone was a very big help in all of this. I don't know if you had anything to add, Simone?
Yeah, I'd just like to say it was a true team effort. I mean, we really did draw on expertise of staff from all over the district. It's still a work in progress, and I think that we view it as something where we can do continual improvement. Right? We're trying some new things. It seems like some of them, early registration, for instance, and pre-populating, are working, and maybe some others will be partway there, and we'll need to enhance them a little bit. So we're a learning system, and I think, Al, you've done a great job of explaining some of the challenges we identified and how we've addressed them.
Trustee Prosek?
Thank you. That was I really appreciate the way you guys responded to the shortage and the way you responded to the bus passes and all those things. And those were questions that were coming our way quite a bit. So I appreciate your work on that. Question for you: how many buses do we have in our district? And do we certify all our own buses through our mechanics, or do we have to have an outside source for that, for our bus certification?
So we run 60 buses, and they are certified by our mechanics. They are trained, and we do go through CVSE to commercial vehicle. So that is an annual process that comes in, and then anything new as well. So annually, every bus has to go through CVSE, and any new bus coming on as well. And I have to do a shout out for our team, because CVSE has mentioned more than once, and we have it written. I actually shared with the team a few months ago that we were the example of what districts should be doing with their bus fleet and so that is specifically talking about the maintenance and the work that the mechanics are doing in the shop.
Thanks. Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on those. Sorry, you mentioned you had 1,500 or 2,500, a huge number. Is that sort of tracking to be about the number of students taking transportation, or have you noticed an increase because of this system, or is it too early to tell? Thank you.
So our total we're heading for, it will be just over 4,000 students. We're currently tracking at 2,500, which is probably 1,500 more than we would be in previous years. And at this, yeah, correct. At this point in time, we're tracking very high. Yeah.
Trustee Reed?
Thank you. I just thank you for the presentation. It makes it easier to answer questions when they come our way, for sure. I had a question about moving the fees, bus fees to student fees. Does that create an increased workload for clerical staff somewhere else? And if so, is there support for that, or is it kind of just rolling into an existing system and not an appreciable amount?
We did have conversation with the teams on that, and the understanding we had back is it is rolling into a current system. We did, like I said, we did reach out and have those conversations to see if and the teams came back with not many concerns. It was something that would work well for them. It's already a system in place and happening.
I just wanted to say thank you so much. I think this was a good example of getting lots and lots and lots of feedback from the community about what wasn't working and working to fix it. I know I personally saw a lot of comments like just online and stuff, and I passed on several of those to the superintendent and stuff. So I'm just really glad to see that we looked at it like a system and figured out where all of the different, whatever you call them, pinch points or whatever, were, and that we're really making a difference. So I have seen such a huge decrease in bus complaints over the last little while compared to what I was seeing at the beginning of the year. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Chair. Greatly appreciate the presentation. I did want to highlight and appreciate the waiving of bus fees up until May 31st. The renewed board policy outlined fees not being a barrier to access to student transportation. I think the waiving of those fees goes a long way to upholding not just the language but the intention of that policy. I did want to just raise, most of the feedback didn't come directly to the board. I think where there was feedback that did come to the board, it was where the challenges in transportation also created barriers for students in accessing meal programs or accessing equity-based supports. as they start their school day. And I just wondered if that's feedback you've been able to incorporate in anticipation of next year running a bit more smoothly.
Yeah, there was several of those concerns that had come up, and I mean that's a very important one. And even getting to events, sports events, and different events that were happening during that time. So yeah, that was definitely a big part of our concern and work towards.
So it sounds like our hope anyway, our aspiration is to be in better shape next year, have kids in a position to access those resources.
I can speak to having them there on time and ready for school. Yes, yeah, absolutely.
Trustee Westerby.
Thank you. Yeah, just echoing the thanks for the presentation and the opportunity to address some of the things that we've been hearing. So through the chair to staff, just wanting to make sure that the communication to staff as well has been addressed for the scheduling of the routes. And I'm wondering if that student fee clerical combination of change will help that communication flow so that everybody is sure to know when and where the students are going to be and that everyone's on the same page. I don't know. I'm just making sure that's a clear question.
I'm just trying to put the pieces together. So as we're talking, so the question you're asking is, does the team have a clear understanding, a time frame for the events that are happening? Am I correct? Sorry.
Yeah, so if someone has to be picked up early and dropped off early, making sure that the staff at the school site is aware of that early drop off and present for that change in schedule.
Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, so that work is done through our dispatch, right? So we have a dispatch team and do a fantastic job. Unfortunately, if they're busy answering the phones and those, that compromises that work. And now with a clerical person that can focus on that, they can focus on those pieces. So yes, improvements to those items are made.
Okay, thank you everybody. Thank you so much again for the presentation. It looks like we don't have any more questions, so we'll be moving on to information items. 3.1 is trustee written reports, which are in the package. 3.2 is BCSTA report. Trustee Reed.
Yes, thank you. So I did have the opportunity to attend Provincial Council virtually on February 24th. I did include some highlights from Provincial Council in my report, including some of the highlights from what we heard just from the different committees and people present. 2 motions were passed. Information about that is in the package and the summary that was sent out by email. It's on the portal if you want to go through that. There was a presentation from CSF, which was really interesting. The slides are actually available in the summary on the portal, and I actually recommend looking through it because it kind of does a really good job of explaining what they do and how many students they service and how spread out their district is and ways that we can kind of be more supportive of them as well. So I found that to be a very interesting thing. I would recommend that. And just to highlight as well, the Indigenous Education Committee report, it did include information on Bill 40, plans for a new knowledge series, and information on reconciliation funding, which I also found very interesting. In the emails that we've received, there's also been a budget media release for further information about the budget, BCSCA statement on it and such. And then I just wanted to highlight that AGM is coming up April 18th to 21st. The agenda and speaker profiles are already available online. Motions will be distributed March 19th. And then they just wanted to highlight that as directors now serve 2-year terms, there won't be elections at AGM this year. And they're still looking for deputy chairs and readers, volunteers to help chair and read motions at AGM. And I believe the deadline was a couple of days from now. It is in the emails if you go in there and take a look. So that's pretty much what I wanted to highlight for you.
Excellent. Thank you, Trustee Reed. Are there any questions for Trustee Reed on her report? Seeing none, we'll move on to public participation. Comments or questions concerning the agenda. I do have something I want to read for everyone first. All right, so the superintendent recently met with a parent from our community, and it was determined during that meeting that clarity was required regarding board meeting protocols. The purpose of board meetings is for the Board of Education to conduct its business in public for clarity and transparency. It is not a public meeting in terms of the public. It's not a town hall. basically, that's what I'm saying. The board agenda is co-constructed by the superintendent, secretary, treasurer, chair, and vice chair per the board work plan for the year. Although the School Act does not require public participation, the Chilliwack Board of Education has provided 2 opportunities for public participation as per Section 5 of Bylaw 5. The purpose of public participation is for members of the public to speak to listed agenda items as per the published board agenda for each meeting. The contents listed within each trustee report are not agenda items and are not part of the board's business for the meeting. As per Section 5.2 of Bylaw 5, individuals will be limited to a total of 2 minutes per speaker. Speakers must identify themselves before speaking with your full name. Persons addressing the board are reminded that when requests or questions are directed to the board, actions or answers to many questions may be deferred pending board consideration. The chair may indicate another means of response if a question cannot be answered at the time. Matters currently under negotiation or litigation are related to personnel or student circumstances, including names or specific classrooms, are not permitted and will not be addressed in the public participation periods. Community members with other comments or questions are encouraged to contact the board chair regarding governance questions and the superintendent regarding operations questions. When members of the public come to the podium to ask questions or comment regarding items on the agenda, they will be respectfully reminded if their questions or comments are unrelated to the agenda. The chair will continue to remind the member of the public that they're only allowed to speak to items on the agenda. If anyone chooses not to follow the protocol, they'll be reminded 3 times until they're asked to respectfully leave the podium. When there's evidence that members of the public are choosing not to follow protocols established for board meeting, and after due warning, the board will take a 5-minute recess in order to continue focusing on the board's business for the evening. All that being said, if anyone has a question or comment concerning the agenda, please come to the podium.
Hi, my name is Jim Waynes. Thank you so much for letting me speak. I would like to address the superintendent's report from last month. I just have a logistic question.
The superintendent's report's not on the agenda.
It's being adopted in the minutes, is it not?
No, that's not how this works. That's not an agenda item.
He's being evaluated though.
No,
Are-
that's not an agenda item.
Sorry, no, we're not answering questions about last month's superintendent meeting, no. There are cards on the podium with the board email address. If you have a question, we'll happily answer it by email. Thanks.
Good afternoon. It's good to see you all. I'm going to speak to the evaluation of the superintendent item, which is on the agenda. The evaluation of the superintendent.
Sorry, you need to introduce yourself.
My name is Dr. Daryl Ferguson, grandparent in the district. I'd like to just make some comments and then a few questions regarding the evaluation of the superintendent. So I'll address my questions to the superintendent if possible. In reading through the evaluation, I would like to pay attention to 2 principles I read. One, ethical leadership, principle number 8.4, states the superintendent should facilitate meaningful collaboration with parents and community based on trust, honesty, and respect. Another principle, which is under communication and community relations, number 9.1, the superintendent must establish good relations with parents and caregivers. This does relate in this evaluation to the previous description of the possibly new policy, I don't know if it is, of how this board may withhold information from parents regarding children that the board or superintendent may feel need protection from parents. And I've got this report, which you've all read. The quote from that is, where students do not want parents to know what they're doing in school, we, according to the superintendent, we will work with the student to determine whether and with appropriate support disclosure to parents is possible. Who will make this decision, given that teachers are not qualified as psychologists, doctors, or psychiatrists to encourage students in the direction of life-altering surgeries or drug dependency? The teacher has usurped the role of the parent. This opens the door, may open the door, superintendent, for legal action against the district if a child
Okay, your time is up actually. So, Superintendent, do you wish to respond to any of what Mr. Ferguson has said?
Consideration for this evening.
Point of order, Chair.
What's your point of order?
My point of order is that nowhere in anything that you read states that the superintendent's report is out of bounds for comment. It is part of the agenda. It's in the minutes. It's also on the agenda. So I call point of order.
Okay, that's fine. I've heard your point
For
of order.
Mr. Weens to be able to make his comments.
I've heard your point of order. Last month's superintendent report is not on the agenda. That's
It
my
is in the
ruling.
minutes, Chair.
My name's Linda D'Armani, and I'm a taxpayer. But I also can see that the superintendent's report is on the agenda, and I have to ask the question is, why do they always put the superintendent's report at the end where we can't have anything to say about what's in the superintendent's report? And then if we try to ask this the next time, then we're told that's not part of the report, but it is. The superintendent's report is part of the agenda. So can that be moved so we can actually talk about it?
I will give a board response, and then I'll let the superintendent respond as well. So the superintendent's report is there for the superintendent to report to the board. It's not there for the public to directly question staff. If you have a question about the superintendent's report, you're perfectly welcome to send an email to the superintendent after the board meeting.
Thank you. Just to provide some clarity, this is a meeting of the board in public. It's not a public board meeting. I actually met with the parent last week, had a long conversation. My invitation is always there. You have an operations questions, email me, come and see me. We can have a conversation with the center. But realistically, I provide a report to the Board of Education because the fact that I provide a weekly memo to the board, and this is part of the transparency, so the public understands the work the board does to be able to support the strategic plan.
If I understand that correctly, then you're saying that we have no voice here, but you're just here to tell us what you're doing, is that, and that you can tell us that you're gonna encourage children to lie to their parents and we don't get to say anything.
So, the public board meeting is your opportunity to speak to agenda items. So the action items are the things that the board is voting on. So this is an opportunity for the public to speak to those action items and to say, you know, I saw that you're going to vote on this. This is my thoughts about it. I'm providing you some feedback. This isn't a public forum for you to just ask random questions about whatever you want. And it's not your opportunity to grill the superintendent. If you have questions for the superintendent, you can make an appointment with him, and he said he's happy to talk to you.
Chair, I have a question.
What's your question?
My question is, that statement that you just read to the board, was that done in consultation with the entire board, and who wrote it?
It was, the chair and the vice chair and the superintendent and the secretary treasurer have a meeting every week, and we talk about how best to proceed with board meetings so that the board can do its work in an efficient manner.
I understand that, but it was not done in consultation with the board?
No, it wasn't, but it's
Thank
in
you.
it, but it's, it was, hold on. If you're gonna ask a question in public, then you're gonna listen to the answer. Yes, you are, because this was sent to every member of the board. You didn't respond to it, so if you had a problem, maybe you should have responded.
Point of
Chair?
order, I don't think this is actually on the agenda.
Thank you very much, Trustee Westerby. I agree with you.
Allowed a second question? I'd like to continue with just this wonderful role of superintendent. I really have appreciated working with the superintendent previously. I do see some potential difficulties, and that's all I'd like to raise, that could be legal difficulties if this report becomes reality or policy, whereby parents information from parents can be withheld. This opens up.
Sorry, press your button. Sorry, Trustee.
This is not on the revision of the superintendent role. What we're asking for, Chair, is for the members to provide information on what's written here, not provide us with outcomes or potential outcomes that you're worried about.
Thank you, Trustee Westerby. I agree. You're correct. That's a correct point of order. This isn't on the agenda, what you're asking.
Okay, I'll refer to the role of the superintendent. Just focus on that. Point 8, ethical leadership. The superintendent should facilitate meaningful collaboration with parents and community based on trust, honesty, and respect. I believe that trust and honesty are going to go out the window if you keep secrets from parents. Thank you very much.
I just really want to clarify that the superintendent's report was based on a legal opinion. It's a legal opinion. It's case law, just so you know.
My name's Dana Burton. I am a parent of 3 children that attend the Chilliwack school system. I am a taxpayer and I am a working professional for the school district. I just wanted to speak to transportation. Thank you so much for all your hard work. As 2 parents that work for the school board, we are very stressed when we don't know if our children are going to get a ride home at the end of the day. And I just sit there waiting for that little app to tell me that my kids are stuck at school. So, and they all get out before me. So that's a challenge. And I just wondered if the transportation department, in collaboration with the school board, has any kind of a strategic plan for, as you purchase new buses, making sure that they're wheelchair accessible so that kids can access the buses with their community children in their neighborhood and like-minded people in their community, so that they're not delegated to special buses that go on a special schedule. Thank you.
So, yes, please.
Yes, thank you for the question and thank you for the appreciation of the work the team did. So actually brought up from the board was the importance of the wheelchair buses, making sure that those are available. And yes, and moving to, we have the larger buses, which are the 84s, and incorporating wheelchair equipped 84 passenger buses is part of our work that's happening. So thank you.
Thank you very much. Okay, so that's the end of the first public participation period. We do have another one at the end. And we're going to take a brief 5-minute recess again, just because we're having a little mic problem with batteries or something. So 5-minute recess. mostly gotten our battery issues back sorted, so I'm going to call this meeting back to order. All right, so we are on to action items. So action item 5.1 is Board Authority Authorized BAA Course Proposal. I believe this is, oh, Trustee Swanky. Yeah, okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Chair. I'm happy to introduce action item 5.1, my capacity as BAA liaison. The Board Authority Authorized, or BAA Committee, convened on January 9th, February 8th, and March 4th. At the February 8th meeting, the proposed courses Immersive Inquiry Institute 10, 11, and 12 were presented to the committee and recommended for consideration by the Board of Education. The key considerations for of the committee included is the committee satisfied that the course presented is unique from one another, so is each 10, 11, and 12 unique? Is there satisfaction that the proposed course is distinct from the ministry courses? Again, that was satisfied. And was there satisfaction that this contributes to a meaningful graduation for students in the district? So being that it met those three requirements, and I'm sure others, I'd like to introduce Stacey Parsons and Brooke Holler to present to us Immersive Inquiry Institute 10, 11, and 12.
Thank you, Trustee Swanky.
Okay, awesome. Well, thanks for listening to us today. So we wanted to share some work that's been happening as a larger group at our school, but also we're hearing were pockets of interest in this across our district. So while I'm going to share with you the Imagine context today about how we would utilize this, I think this is a course that would benefit students across our district and just allow a ton of opportunities for choice. And I think sometimes kids do things that don't get them credit but should. And this is one of those things where we want to honor just the really cool things that kids bring and the passions that they have. And that doesn't always align with ministry course codes. So sometimes it does, and that's great, but sometimes it doesn't. So we just want to share a little bit about what it looks like at our school, but I think there's a lot of flexibility for how this could look and bring some opportunities for kiddos. So at Imagine, we have these 2 times a year, and they are 2-week immersive. I could have just written intensive because they are intensive inquiry institutes, and they are grades 10 to 12. And while kids are in the same cohort for 10 to 12, the learning looks a little bit different for them. And when you see them starting grade 10, they begin as a collaborative inquiry on a particular focus area with our younger kids, where they look at this inquiry as a whole class and they go through the process together. And as we gradually release, once they get to grade 12, you see just such amazing opportunities for leadership, for depth, and for kids to actually lead the learning for themselves and for the younger peers that they have. And I think what it allows us to do is just really deep personalization of learning, because we have several paths. So we have like whole cohort ones that are focused around a subject area, which doesn't always mirror the things you would see in traditional courses, and sometimes it does. But then we also have an opportunity for kids to apply and engage in a personal passion project where they go through a really rigorous inquiry process independently on a subject of their choice. And I'll share a couple when we get a bit further, but like we had a student who recorded a whole album in our podcast studio over 2 weeks, from writing to directing. We had a kid who sewed a Victorian dress who had never picked up a sewing machine before from start to finish, but researched like the historical concepts of dress. So just really intense variety. And I think what it leads to is independence. And when you see kids who have been in this process for a few years and their capacity in 12 for leading those and finding their niche, it's just amazing. Really driven by student passions. So the sessions that we have are driven by student, like we survey them and they determine what they do, and then we offer, and then we create experiences around our kids. And just again, it just honors the authentic learning that they're doing with actual credit, because much of this work actually leads into career work, which is really, really cool too. So when you look at the BA, we do have grade 10, 11, and 12, and like the BC curriculum, there are parallels that transfer all the way through the 3 grades, but it's really how we look at the learning and how we structure it to make that differentiation. So like I said, in grade 10, you may sign up for a theater production one. And you might be with a whole cohort of kids who are working on a theater production. But by the time you're in grade 12, you're either designing your own, or you're like working in collaboration with the teacher to create the set or the lighting or the sound with it. So it's really, it's positioning kids as co-creators, and by the time they're there, we have kids who probably could lead deep dives for whole other little cohorts of kids. And the skills that they gain are different. So when we look at single disciplines, the first goal in grade 10 is to get them to just have a really rich understanding of that discipline. So you'll see in the next slide in a moment, you'll see things like drama or fashion design or astrophysics. So those ones are quite intensive content where we're learning the intensity of that subject. Whereas as we progress through the grades, because we assess them in a competency-based way, you start to see skills that are really transdisciplinary, that are those competencies in the curriculum that transcend math or science around collaboration and communication and personal responsibility. So you really see them start to make those parallels from what they did in that intensive focus to how they can just use that as human skills in all of the courses that they go into. So the scaffolding is different and the release is different. So we start out quite, I don't want to say controlled, but just understanding the foundations of inquiry and how that can apply as a whole group, but then how do we release that so they leave us with an inquiry stance and a mindset when they're in grade 12 that they could design their own learning experiences. So like on the right there, the first top one was our personal shop craft. That was one of our deep dives where kids created and designed their own shop projects over 2 weeks. The second one was a grade 12 legacy project where their personal passion project was to create a mural as a legacy thing to leave in our school. And it's a little tiny little piece of writing there, but we didn't just sort of create this. We borrowed and leaned heavily on some work that other districts have done. The Inquiry Hub in Coquitlam had approved a I want to say 8 or 9 years ago on the foundations of inquiry, and we leaned heavily on that for some inspiration. So thanks, Kirk. So these are some of the ones we've had. And like I said, some of these absolutely fit ministry course codes and like we're good to go for those, and some of them just don't. So everywhere from video game development, photography, animation, musical theater, astrophysics, Indigenous land and culture explorations is one we're planning for the spring. We did a baking institute, outdoor ed, childcare, medieval weaponry, which children were like they were trying to pay to get into. We did not accept money for it, but they were trying. Shopcraft, fashion design, philosophy and film, and then those personal passion projects, which are so individually varied by the kids. So what it does is it allows us to not say no to kids when they have like a brilliant plan and they have an idea and they want to deepen their skills. We get to say yes and here's how we make it happen. And I think what we've hit, because there's also kids who exhaust certain credit paths as they go up, because this is just a kid who just wants to take drama every day once they've got their core done, but you hit a certain amount of credit max for that. So this allows kids to just go so deep into it. And I think the powerful piece for me is that all of those link so clearly to careers. So while they're doing this like beautiful inquiry work and they're learning these skills, they're also like getting real industry connections. Like the video game one, we had a video game company who came and taught the kids, then kids made some games, the company came back, gave them some feedback. So I just think they're powerful in a lot of ways, but particularly just around the choice and joy that kids have in them. Like they are the best 2 weeks out of the year because everybody is doing something that they really love. That's really exciting. So in terms of assessment, there's layers to it. There is a ton of peer and self-assessment, and we do have increasing pressure for our grade 12 students to be deeper in their thinking and in their metacognition and how they sort of reflect in their place in the deep dives. You can't see them because they're really tiny, but we have a series of 3 what we would call formative learning conversations, which we would check in with the kids at the very beginning, like what are you bringing to this? What are the skills you're looking to develop? What's your attack plan? Then we have a mid-deep dive inquiry, and then we have a final reflection. So those are scaled along the way, but also assessment is really ongoing on the day. What's your plan? What are we doing? What do you need next? Who can I connect you with? What does it look like? But then in terms of summative, which is our final, it's how they demonstrate and exhibit their learning. So if you're not bored in June for our exhibition, it's when we share this with our community, and the learning is just really, really visible, because I think sometimes people ask where the rigor is, but it's in bringing a beautiful product to life and sharing it with the world and doing those like multiple iterations of something. And like kids like sweat over this and they're proud of it and it's open to the public. And I think it's how they share those pieces, whether it's in a rock band concert or a play or a pop-up arcade. they're really authentic experiences that kids share at the end. And like I said, just a gradual release of responsibility. We really deliberately want grade 10s to 12s in the same deep dive, so we don't stream them by grade year, because we really want those grade 12s to be leaders within that and to have that capacity for leadership and to mentor the other kids. And so the grade 10s can see what's possible when you're a couple years down the road. So some of our highlights, which I think is, again, transferable to other schools, we do 2 weeks twice a year because it's what works for us, and we want that long, flexible chunk of time to go deep into the rhythm. But I could see it happening in a lot of applications. But community and belonging, people find friends in deep dives they never see in their core, and they are lifelong friendships because they have these experiences together. We see a deep career industry connection. A lot of co-construction, and I think what's cool is you get to see kids becoming leaders in their learning and not being passive about what's coming to them, but actually helping design those experiences. Collaboration, which we know can be stressful, but really rewarding at the end. And just amazing leadership from our kids. And we use the word beautiful work all the time. It's a Ron Berger quote, but it's like, it's work that kids sweat and pour and bleed over, but are so proud it's not work that goes in like the recycling bin on your way out the door, like when you're done the assignment. So I think like this is when kids have those moments when they're so proud to share that passion, like that's what brings you to work every day. So we're hopeful that this course, we don't need to use this for all of our deep dives, but what it would do, it would give us permission to not say no to kids and to give them opportunities that they do usually on the side and don't get credit for. So yeah, I think folks can see the three. There's a link within it to the model that outlines like the progression of skills from like a single discipline to a transdisciplinary. There's also a link to some project descriptions where you'll see how those overarching inquiry questions frame the whole learning cycle. And then there's also a link to the 3 learning conversations that we have. So yeah, so that's a little bit about immersive institutes.
Can you just push your button for 1 second? Yes. Okay. I just have one question. So I guess I'm a little bit confused about how credits currently work versus how credits work if we approve this. Like, I'm down with everything. I love it, but I'm not quite understanding. So normally you've been doing these 2 weeks twice a year deep dives. Are kids currently getting credit as long as it's curriculum related, but then it's not if it's, or are they not getting credit and it's just attached to like their science mark or whatever? Oh, sorry, press your button.
There we go. They are getting credit now, but we have hit some rigidity with ministry course codes that is challenging. One of the pieces that we've hit is that most courses past a grade 10 level are only offered in a 4 credit option, which doesn't give us the flexibility of the 2-week immersive institutes. And I think the other piece is there are ways to give kids credit to reflect this around like personal development or in like IDS, like an independent design sort of piece. But what we want on their credit history is like you were in theater production, do you know what I mean? Or you were in astrophysics, so it like actually shows that you didn't take some personal development course and do something that's a little mysterious to us, that you were actually in video game development or shopcraft. And I think it's the others fit but not comfortably, and this gives us more freedom.
So just to clarify, do they get like whatever, like for credit for a full course, or is it partial? Like,
so
credit?
we like if you look at the instructional hours that we have for the 1 deep dive, it's 2 credits, and then if through the course of the year they earn 4 credits. Now there are some deep dives that you sign up for both, like outdoor ed is all, like if you select outdoor ed you get it both terms, and that's a full 4 credit. But we also don't want our kids to have to choose the same deep dive every time if they don't want to. We want them to have that variety piece.
Excellent, thank you. Trustee Prose.
Thank you. I had the privilege of going through your school last year and talking to some of your students, and I'm trying to understand. I read all this stuff. There's quite a bit of process in there. So first of all, I want to say is in the grade 10 model, and I want to acknowledge the kids there were just amazing. Like the one girl there was showing me her science diagram, and I think she was developing a nuclear weapon because it was so intense. I almost wanted to hire her, but it was just. But she was very enthusiastic, and I remember being quite impressed with her intensity. However, question for, or not a question, somewhat kind of a comment. Like, so you have multidiscipline in grade 10, then you have interdiscipline in grade 11, and then you have transdiscipline in grade 12. They all kind of connect, and yet they don't. So what keeps what makes you? How do you keep grade 10 at grade 10 and grade 11 at grade 11 and grade 12 at grade 12 without pushing them? Because are these people? They're not always working alone, are they? Are they always working alone, and they always working with in a setting where they're communicating with just subject matter, or are they also communicating with other people? That's my first question.
Great question. Most of it is collaborative, and I would say probably 75% of our kids do it as like a teacher scaffolded and led whole cohort where it's really focused on that one discipline. Now, that being said, there are kids in grade 12 who are in there, but they have a totally different role on it. So like maybe the teacher has a group of grade 10s and they're working on, I'm just going to use theater because it's a good example one, but maybe they're working on theater, they're working on the play. In the background, David, one of our grade 12 students, is designing cues on the set, and he's collaborating with the teacher and he's collaborating with the groups to create it, and he's working on breakout groups and training other people to do it. So I think it's how they find their niche role in it. And when we think of like the single disciplinary, it's like for musical theater example, like we want them to know all of the content and pieces of musical theater. But I think once our kids hit multiple deep dives, they start to see, and we start to help them reflect that those skills are actually the same across disciplines. And they just don't know that in grade 10. Like they don't know that collaboration and communication, like the key human skills are the same, but we help sort of name that for them along the way, and then we find leadership roles for them in it. I would say there is a larger percentage of grade 12s who take a personal passion project as opposed to like working in a collaborative project, because they often focus those on like career goals, like what do we want to do after we leave that is personal to me, because grade 12s, they're seeing the future. They're ready to go. Does that kind of explain it a bit?
Yeah, it does. But I guess the other question I have now is how do you take?
Sorry, Brooke, can you press your button?
Sorry. Wait, so how do you take a student in grade 10, and let's say, for instance, medieval weaponry, which is something that I would probably want to do. What would that look like on in a multidiscipline viewpoint, and then moving into an interdiscipline and moving into a transdiscipline? What would that look like? I know you use theater. Are you connecting theater and weaponry and clothing, and are you mixing those up? Like in a medical system, we would have nurses, we'd have doctors, we have psychiatrists, we have it's all with healthcare, but it's all different aspects of healthcare that have different people working within that context. How does that play for these students? I hope I'm asking a fair question here.
Oh, I'm going to press the button. So it's a combination. So like if we take like medieval weaponry as an example for that, the grade 10s are like really learning like shop tools, like how do I cut things? How do I not cut myself? How do I get like a good slope? What's the historical tools that they might have used? Whereas like the grade 12s are going to go deeper into like maybe even ethical considers of medieval weaponry, or they're going to come and pitch a project and they're going to have their own goals. So I think it's about the level of freedom of choice, because we want to develop individual skills in grade 11 and 12 so that when they get to, grade 10 and 11, so that when they get to grade 12, we can set them free. So I think it's a shift over time from the teacher leading to the kid saying, I want to do this and here's my plan. And I also think the big difference is in those learning conversations and how we're asking kids and what's coming out of them. So like, are we asking them like, how was your cut today? Was it rough? Was it things? Or was it, how did you contribute to your team today? How did you lead learning for other people? So I think the conversations with kids in grade 10 are very different than the conversations with kids in grade 12.
If I may, just my last question, I promise. So is this different than what you've done before? Or is this expanding a process that you're already practicing today?
It's a process that we have. I think we do integration and we look at interdisciplinary learning across our subjects at Imagine. I think what makes this difference is the intensity of the time and the intensity of the freedom that this permits with kids, that it's not it's not a social studies 10 course. Do you know what I mean? It's quite free, it's quite open, and I think it allows kids to bring in stuff that fire them up, if that kind of makes sense. So we have a practice of deep dives, and we've been giving kids credit in creative ways. It's just not, when we print off their transcripts, it doesn't say they were in medieval weaponry. It doesn't say they were in shopcraft, and it limits, we just don't want to say no to the kids.
Trustee Reed.
Yeah, thank you so much. I've had the opportunity to speak to some of your staff and some of your students just out in the community, and the passion for this is very apparent, as it is in your presentation, so thank you. As somebody that's neurodivergent, I can see how this would allow for a growth outside of traditional school system and letting students kind of run. My question is, what about the students that don't know? Is there, could you speak a little, because I have a child who would look at that and go, so what's the collaboration process? How do you guide them to find something that they enjoy?
So when we start by, we don't even talk about anything first until we survey kids, and we're like, hey, if you could do anything, what would you do? Like, it's quite open in terms of that. We then take that data to a teacher staff meeting, and then teachers are like, well, that sounds cool, I can offer that, because teachers are teaching to their passion too, right? Like, they're not, if they were hired for science, they might be teaching outdoor ed because that's what like makes their heart happy. And then we pitch it to kids. We do quite a lot of advertising about it, and I would say that most kids just pick a session because like they just sound really, really juicy. Like, well, it sounds way cooler than I'm going to English, right? It's like, I'm going to go to medieval weaponry, like that's pretty cool. But then there are always kids who are like, well, I don't like those sessions, and we're like, how can you not like those sessions? But I get that. So then we have our inclusive design team who will sit and go through them, because I think sometimes they just don't know what the sessions mean, but we go through them. And then we also have the opportunity, because we have that personal passion project, to be like, okay, so you think everything we're offering you isn't the best, like, what do you want to do? And so I think what I like about deep dives is I find it's easier to find a place for everyone in deep dives that I would say is in the regular classroom, because it's like, and I mean, sometimes they change. Sometimes they're like, day one, they're like, this is not what I signed up for, and they switch, and that's okay. So, but I feel like it's much easier to find places for kids in this one, because sometimes I think we just don't ask kids enough what they want to do, and then when we ask them, they're like, oh yeah, I want to do this, and we're like, okay, well, we can make this happen for you. Yeah.
Just has decision paralysis.
Well, now they get very distressed when they don't get their number one choice right away. There is some distress over that, so we're negotiating that with them. But I think it was harder in our first year because they didn't see what it was. But like, now that we've had a few years and you see like kids with swords and you see kids with video games, they're like, that's what draws them in, and they're like, I want to do that. Or they just love that teacher and they're like, I want to work with Mr. Slykehouse because he's like magical. But
yeah. Trustee Prostate, you've
So
asked 3 questions, so I'm just going to check if anybody else has a question.
Oh, sorry.
Trustee Westerby.
Just have a bit of a point of privilege before I address my question. I just want to know, for process, are we asking questions now and then going to get into discussion later?
Sorry, this is just questions to ask so that you understand what the course is. In a second, after everyone's done asking questions, then we'll put the motion on the table, and then we'll actually be speaking to the motion.
So my final question is, how do you teach English, math, and science in these courses? How do you integrate that in your courses? I imagine you probably have some process.
Sorry, I just gonna say this is actually not about that. She probably could answer that, but that's actually not what this course is. So I'm just gonna, for the interest of time,
Okay.
you can totally contact her, and I bet she has like a ton of stuff to answer. Trustees, like.
Go ahead.
Just one question, if I may. So, not assuming outcome, should the board approve the course, it's available to all secondary schools in the district, and you may not be in a position to address this. Is there any sense of how other secondary schools may take this opportunity and make it unique to, say, Sardis or CSS or GW Graham or Queecole, given that they don't run these deep dive programs the same structure? Like, do we have an idea of what this could become should it be approved?
Totally. And we didn't call them deep dives because I think that is our Imagine context. So we called them immersive inquiry because really that's what the structure is, and that's more lendable to other schools. So this did come out of a conversation because we met earlier this year with secondary principals and with Nikki to talk about like how do we sort of align all of our coding and find as many opportunities we can. So while I don't know that it will look like a 2-week, twice a year deal, there was conversations around running it like an X block kind of theme or for part of the day and just finding different ways within their existing schedule to tie it in. So I think when we were talking as that group, there was appetite for this to be used in a variety of contexts in each school.
Did you have a follow-up? Okay. All right. Trustee Moss.
So I'm going to restate Trustee Prosey's question differently. So this is an elective, and there's more electives in grade 11 and 12 than there are in grade 10, correct? So so how many courses are there in, say, grade 10 that would be considered non-elective, and how much room is there for a course like this? So they can choose, they can take French, they can take, I don't know, what your other electives are. So how does this stack up with the other electives that the kids can take 10, 11, and 12? Thank you.
You're absolutely right, because grade 10 is the year that the government says you have to take all of these courses to graduate, and then there's less requirements as you get to 11 and 12. So at our school, kids take 4 electives a year, which like I would say a baseline is 4. So like grade 10s have 4, grade 11s and 12s, once they meet those grad requirements, can fill in some of those depending on like the path they want to take and if they're going to university or what they need to go by. And then so really imagine it's like half a day is our core. So that's when you would do in grade 10, like your science, your socials, your math. Then you'd have electives in the afternoon. I think what the difference is with this is there is incredible power to have those kids all day, every day at 2 weeks with no transitions and no moving around in their daytime apart. So I think it allows community to come in a way, because like, for example, the Baking Institute, we couldn't get someone committing to coming in every single day for our daily elective, but they could give us 3 days in a row for deep dive. So it allows us to kind of like bring people in a different way that we have time. And once kids get in the flow, like you should see the medieval tailoring. There's a medieval theme here. They like that. But like they're literally like this all day. Like once they're in that artistic flow, like there's no transition time and they don't use it. So it only gives them essentially the difference of 1 extra course for their electives, because it's like 2 and 2. So it gives them the equivalent of a 4. But I think what it gives them is an experience that's very difficult to replicate on a day-to-day for like an hour and a half a day or whatever the time chunk is. Does that kind of help? Okay, thanks, Heather.
Okay, trustees, can I get someone to make the motion? Thank you so much. We're free to sit down. I think we'll call you back up if we have a question.
Sorry, I have one more question. What kind of career options are there looking at a course like this? What are the benefits to this course in a career, and what are the career options that students would?
I would say actually we do careers better in deep dive.
Sorry, I'm gonna need you to come back and press it. Yeah. Thought we were done.
It's all good. I would say we do careers better in deep dives than we do at any other time, because they're directly linked to careers that kids want. So I think one of our big goals, as I imagine, is for kids to do like the work of the real world before they get there. So in deep dives, I see people bringing in experts all the time and making industry connections. And also what kids get to do is, which I didn't speak about, they also, once they're older, get to do an internship instead. Like kids can sign up for it. Like we had one of our grade 11s this year do her last deep dive for an entire 2 weeks at Tie Crop, welding on the thing and building that experience that way. So we had Banyan, who worked at the IT department for the district the whole time and was like running fibers and ceilings and all sorts of stuff. So I think what it does is it gives us a chunk for kids to pursue that career thing and have direct industry connections. So I think our teachers would share that they feel like they're doing careers in the most meaningful way here, because it's like something they love with an expert who can help them and make a connection for them once they leave us. So yeah, thanks.
Oh, Trustee Vonberg.
Make a motion.
Oh, I think Trustee Swanky had already had his finger on it.
Thank you, Chair. I would move that the Board of Education approve Board Authority authorized course Immersive Inquiry grade 10, 11, and 12.
Seconder. Everybody seconded. Okay, Trustee Frost. Trustee Swanky, do you want to speak to your motion?
Sure, I'll speak to it just briefly, Chair. As mentioned, in my view, this satisfies the requirement that each course is unique from one another. It satisfies the requirement that it's unique from ministry courses. We've talked a great deal about, in part, why this is coming forward is to be unique and enable this learning. And I have no doubt that this supplements a meaningful graduation from the Chilliwack School District. What I think it would also highlight is that this enables students to pursue their passion interests and their passion projects. It enables teachers to exercise greater autonomy in supporting those students, and also ensures that credit can be provided, that funding is available to supporting meaningful paths to graduation. So I would encourage members to support it, and I think it's a great proposal for the district.
Trustee Wester.
Yeah, I just want to say that this is honestly really amazing. I really love this course outline, and hearing from Trustee Swanky that it satisfies all the things that we need to satisfy for a course is really great news. But I just want to speak to this course specifically, and like it really honestly makes me wish I was 15 and back in high school, because just reflecting on my time in school, I would have benefited hugely greatly from something like this. Actually, I had a teacher sneak me into a special course in high school into college, and that gave me an opportunity to find my passion. And if it wasn't for that, I don't think I'd be sitting here today, to be honest with you. So I just want to say that something like this would be hugely important for tons of kids out there, and I'm really excited about it, as you can hear in my voice. So totally want to speak in favor of passing this, and I really want to say thank you for all the work that was put into it.
Thank you. I was thinking nothing makes me want to go back to high school, but it does sound like I would have liked high school a lot better if this had been. So, yes, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. I don't see any other comments from trustees. I
had to make one more. Just as this plays out, I don't know if this is a question for you or not, but the extended reality in the Immerse Inquiry Institute, they do extended reality with Headmask, where you actually develop a reality within like right now we look at a screen and I see everybody, but when you have a mask on, you only see what reality is created. Is that part of your program?
Not currently, but it sure.
Okay, the metaverse is coming.
The answer was on the mic for those watching was not currently, but it could be. Thank you. All those in favor that the Board of Education approve the Board Authority authorized course Immersive Inquiry grade 10, 11, and 12. That's unanimous. Thank you, trustees. Okay, we're moving on to 5.2 policy renovation project policy to be repealed. And the motion is will be to remove policy 503, interrogation or interviewing of students by police in schools, and that it is replaced by a robust administrative regulation. So, Superintendent, I believe this is you.
It's actually Assistant Director Rachel Green.
Oh, sorry.
Thank you.
Assistant Director Green.
Okay, good evening, thank you. So we have up for your review this evening our repeal and recommendation to repeal Board Policy 503. So we brought this to you in November 7th, 2023, and it was tabled at that time with the request for us to take it back and consult with partner groups on some feedback. So based on this analysis and then also the consultation that we undertook with the RCMP as well, just to understand the practices and the interministerial protocols that we need to follow, we're bringing this back, and we do believe that Policy 503 is operational in nature and is made redundant by our updated administrative policy procedure.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions before we put the motion on the table? Okay, I'm not seeing any questions, so if, oh, sorry, Trustee West.
Thank you. I do have a question about 1.2.3. And again, this might be better for later. Sorry, of the new procedure. It says if this request is refused, then the principal or designate shall act in loco parentis. And again, it mentions the designate in the second paragraph, but I'm not seeing any definition of designate or what designate could be, or if potentially a student could choose a designate that is reflective of them. So I'm just wondering if potentially Director Green could speak to that, or yeah.
Yes,
Dr. Green, if you have an answer to that, that'd be helpful.
Yeah, so when we looked into this, I know one of the concerns we were looking at was, how are we working through these sorts of processes, because that can be traumatizing for students, and what sort of practices are we following. So we do, with our school-based staff, we follow trauma-informed practices. So if there's a situation where a student does need to have a principal or a designate in the interview with them, they're able to also pick like a trusted adult. If there's someone that they have more of a connection with on that staff other than a principal, we would make sure that that's the person that they could have alongside with them.
Yes, go ahead, Trustee.
I'm just wondering if I missed it, if it's already outlined here in the admin procedure, what you just outlined, if that's in here.
It is not necessarily defined that that's what the designate would be, but that is our practice in schools. Yeah.
All right. Is anyone prepared to?
One more question, I apologize. And just on that exact same line, it says if this request is refused, just to clarify, the refused by the police to Director Green. To clarify. 22.3.
This is what the house will be. Can I meet the judge?
Just want to make 100% sure that.
I can provide some clarity. If you're following right through from one point, if you're following the process by itself, this particular instance, that if there is a requirement to be able to interview that particular child at that moment, then the administrator or someone in the school needs to step in, especially around if there is a health and safety risk to the child.
Can I just clarify, the way I read it was basically kids are not to be interviewed at school, basically ever, except in very specific circumstances where it's like there's risk to the child or whatever. And then normally the school would say, we want to have the parent here to be with the child. But if for some reason the police are like, well, this is about the child's parents, or like some situation where that couldn't happen, then that's when the principal would step in. Or if it's like, this is so time sensitive and their parents are in Hawaii or something, we have to do this. What, I can't think of a reason, but whatever. There would be, that's when the principal would stick. But the first thing is, we don't really do interviews at school, correct? Okay. Trustee Moss?
I have a question from the admin reg procedure where it says 1.2.1 when police officials request an interview with a student on school or district premises in accordance with section 1.2, principal or designate must ensure the student's parents, guardians, child care authorities are contacted immediately. So my question is, what is section 1.2 of what?
It's right there in an emergent situation where there's no question of compromising the student's legal rights and where immediate information is necessary for quick action.
It's referring to itself. Section
1. So this is not the BC handbook that's referred to up above. So this own policies referring, or this own regulation referring to its own self in making a procedure?
If I can provide some clarity through the chair to trustee. 1.2.1 refers to 1.2 in an emergency situation. And in that particular case, they need to be able to contact the parent, guardian, and the child care authorities. Does that clarify for you?
It's not clear the way this is written. And actually, the above paragraph, administrative procedure, the very first paragraph contradicts your 1.2.1. Because this one takes ownership of the students in its care, makes no mention of parents. This one down here says parents absolutely must be contacted. So I just wanted to point that out. You might want to tighten up that procedure.
We'll review 1.2, and I'm looking at that right now.
I, for what it's worth, I didn't notice any problem
No,
with it at all. Trustee Swanky, did you have a point?
Mrs. Jordan will.
I think that it's really important to understand that this admin procedure addresses two pieces. And so I think, thank you, Trustee Richel. I think you provided some clarity with respect to when there's request from our justice arm to have interviews with students. So that's one bucket. The other bucket has to deal with child safety. And so we do have interministerial protocols that we rely on, and those interministerial protocols are based on the BC Handbook for Action of Child Abuse and Neglect, and that was updated in 2017. So foundational to these procedures is that, and then when we do have requests from the RCMP to interview students, that is when we move forward with the process with respect to ensuring first we make that phone call to parents immediately so that they are aware that this request is being made of their student.
Thank you. Trustee Swanky.
Thank you, Chair. Not questions so much, just two comments, if I may, for consideration of staff and the implementation of the proposed administrative procedure. First, I do see included within this, if law enforcement was not forthcoming with a reason to interview or to connect with that student, what I'm reading is that the principal or their designate is empowered to intervene and not allow it to happen. I wanted to be clear the importance of that ability and the support of the board in that fact. The piece I was looking for a bit of clarity on, and it may not be for my benefit, but for administrators seeking to implement this, 2.2 talks about in the case of students of Indigenous ancestry, processes delineated in local education agreements shall be followed. I'm wondering about students of Indigenous ancestry that are not included within local education agreements. Is there processes in place so that they are supported through a distinctions-based lens?
That's a great question, and I'm going to say yes.
Okay.
From just by looking at legislation and our most recent conversations, and that goes without any question.
Would someone like to make this motion so that we can debate the actual motion, which is to repeal the policy? Sure. Trustee Swanky, oh, you're on fire.
Always easier with a question on the floor. Do you need to press again, or am I on?
Sorry. Yes.
Nope, not at all. Thank you. I would move that the Board of Education repeal policy 503, interrogation or interviewing of students by police in school settings.
Do I have a seconder? Trustee Westerby. Thank you. Trustee Swanky, do you wish to speak to them?
Only briefly, in that this work continues to be done in the context of finalizing the policy manual review, that the proposed administrative procedure, I think, goes above and beyond in terms of admitting the importance of upholding the rights of students in any interaction with law enforcement. And my faith in staff to continue to work in refining the administrative procedure as, flaws may present themselves, and it needs to be refined further.
Thank you, Trustee Swanky. Anyone else? Trustee Moss?
So we're debating the policy now, correct? Or repealing the policy?
Yes.
Interviews are to be conducted only with a parent or guardian present. That's what our policy says. That's not what this admin regulation says. And this is very clear, and I am very disturbed over the fact that we're being asked to repeal this policy where the board now has no voice and says nothing about this very serious, important matter where students are concerned. And instead, we've just passed the buck, and we've got an another admin reg in absence of a policy, in the absence of the board's voice. So the board doesn't speak to the importance of ensuring that parents and or guardians are present when a student is interrogated. And I understand that it says this down at 1.2.1, but the very top says that it claims the legal rights of students in its care, its being the entity of the school district. And that I have a serious problem with. So, all that to say, I'm opposing the repealing of this policy. Once again, I just need to note that staff should not be bringing us repealing of policies. It should be a trustee. And I understand that Rachel Green did the work on this, and I very much appreciate it. And this is not anything about you, but especially if a policy is being put on the table to repeal, this should not be coming from staff. This should be coming from a trustee. So.
I'm just going to speak to the repeal. As part of our policy overhaul that we've been undergoing for, oh my gosh, it seems like a lifetime, but I believe it's been 3 years now. The whole plan from the beginning was to go through, find areas that were redundant, pare down our policy manual to be a usable document. And so I think this is in line with that. I also think my one concern about some of the policies where we have repealed them and only now have an admin reg was that we've repealed policies based on the fact there is an admin reg, but then we don't write admin regs and they could be changed. But that was addressed. When we go on to, when we're talking about policy 141, role of the superintendent, the ad hoc committee that I was part of did put specifically a line in there that any changes to admin regs would need to be like shared with the board right away so that we would know that, in which case we could then say, wait, that means we do need a policy now or whatever. So that assuages my concerns about that. So I'm comfortable. I think that this was the admin reg as it's written was done in consultation with all of our partner groups, and so I'm quite confident that it's a robust system, and I think that it is really administrative and operational in nature. So I am okay with it. So I will support the repeal. Trustee Reed.
Yes, so I do support the repeal on the grounds mentioned, and I think that we have a lot of scaffolding, a word used earlier that I love, scaffolding to ensure that the rights of students are protected and the rights of parents and caregivers are protected. But I know that we had concerns in the past about those partner groups, and not just partner groups, but rights holders and community consultation. And I understand that has been done, but I would like if somebody could speak to it a little bit more clearly so that it could be on the record so the public can hear a little bit about that, but also just for my own information before I vote. Thank you.
Superintendent, do you want to speak to, or Director Green speak to what kind of consultation was done about the admin reg?
I can provide some context. This policy repeal was brought back in the month of November. At that time, there was a conversation around making sure that we connect with all of our partner groups. And at the core of the consideration was around the fact that are we able to address the concerns around students that are marginalized in our school community? And that's an ongoing concern. I'm going to say that, as we evolve as a school district, we've actually are spending a lot more time being mindful of our learning environments and making sure that we can represent every single student. And in this particular admin procedure, and I really appreciate the questions being asked, no matter who the student may be in a school situation, it's about the wraparound support structure and to ensure that student isn't traumatized by whatever happens in the school situation. When it comes to our Indigenous learners, we look at our local enhancement agreements. And again, we also extend that to our school-based teams as well as our district school principal of Indigenous Education and her team. And so I want to reassure the Board of Education that we are going to continue to do our due diligence, because this is about raising the human spirit and championing the cause of every single student and the adult in our school system. And that work continues onwards.
Trustee Westerby?
Thank you. I appreciate that the time was taken to bring it back and get the feedback from the partner groups, because that was really important to the trustees here at the table to make sure that all people who would be, influenced or potentially this is not necessarily a nice, easy thing. So the type of people who are going to be interviewed by police potentially have a lot of things going on in their lives. So it's really important that we took the time to find the answers. And on that note, I'd like to potentially, I'm actually looking to the chair for a little bit of guidance on how to follow this up with continuous feedback on how this procedure is affecting students and families in this district. But I do really want to address why it's important that we have a fulsome admin procedure, because right now it says unless deemed absolutely necessary by a school administration, which is absolutely vague and does not give anybody any steps on how to properly make sure that whatever absolutely necessary is. And I also want to mention that the current one being repealed has exceptions to the above procedures are provided for in Board Policy 424, child abuse and neglect, and that's been already repealed. So it's important that we take all the necessary factors when it comes to police interrogation. We also have currently a lot of policies that keep students safe in our schools, policy 310, 311, 312, 313, 314, 350. We've really addressed school safety and student safety in the school district. So I do still have some hesitancies in how this will impact, but I in no way could tell you what that will be. So that's why it's important for me that we address ongoing regular review of how this is impacting our school district. And if that could even be provided to us, that would be even better. Thanks.
I'm wondering, I'm assuming it would have to be in camera because it would be confidential, but if possibly the board could get a report about like the number of interrogations that have happened in a given year or whatever at some point, so that we have a sense of how the system's working.
Thank you. Great question. I think this goes right back to the sense of, I'll be talking about the McCrory survey and some of the data later on, the sense of belonging in our schools. And I think at the end of the day, if you look at all the surveys we complete, this is another set of data that actually points to the sense of belonging. So it makes perfect sense to bring this information back to the members of the Board of Education to get a sense as a measurement of the work that goes on in our schools to support the diversity in the population.
Trustee Reed?
Yeah. So as I sit and consider the repeal process, what Trustee Moss raised, the fact that some of it may not read as clearly to all people, this is the kind of regulation that if somebody's looking for this specific one, they're probably heated, they're probably really invested. I want to make sure that as this is refined, perhaps it is brought forward to us so that we can review that, but take a look at it from a real I would just request that staff, and I know you always do, but just flag it, that it be looked at from a plain language standpoint, and not as from the lens of people who necessarily know where to find it or what it means. Just considering when people would be referencing it. So, and I would appreciate maybe seeing those changes if they're made, or how they're made, just from an accessibility and equity lens. But thank you for your hard work.
Okay, trustees. Oh, Trustee Moss.
So I'm hearing some cautions and some dissatisfaction and hesitation in regard to the admin reg and wanting to have more information. So I would encourage my colleagues, do not vote in favor of repealing this policy if you have any reservations at all.
Okay. Oh,
I just have a bit of a point of privilege and about process of admin regulations and how potentially trustees and the members of the public could continue to weigh in, because as I understand that these are fairly flexible not flexible, that's not the right word, but they're open to review more frequently. So some of the little tidbitty things that we can negotiate afterwards still make sure that the current more robust policy that we see in front of us is taking place now rather than the pretty empty policy that we're looking at repealing. So if you can please provide some clarity, Chair, on the importance, because I just want to make sure that we're doing this right and we're doing right by this policy.
Yeah, so I can provide a little clarity and then the superintendent can follow me. So basically, the admin regulations are very much more detailed than our policies are, but they're for operations. And at this point, I'm quite confident that all of the staff in the district are very, very much understand this. And I think we understand at the table what this policy, what this admin regulation is saying. But in terms of something like putting it in plain language for parents, that could be done at any point. The superintendent would just then bring it back to us. But the content is basically has been done in consultation with all the partner groups. So you're correct. The superintendent can rewrite the admin regulations in consultation with staff, and it doesn't require it coming back to the board for a vote. That is correct. Yeah.
I can add to it, and I think part of, if you look on the website by itself, it provides opportunity for parents to provide feedback. Could be staff members too, and this is they're green documentation, and the beauty is that as policy and procedures, ministerial protocols are updated, we can be responsive. At the end of the day, the big question is around, why do we have admin procedures? They need to be operational. We need to be able to be nimble in being able to implement that when things do change. And I'm going to provide another context. For the very first time since I've been in the school district, people actually know the admin procedures and the policies that have been implemented because we've been talking so much about it. We've had common conversations. So it is making a difference.
Sorry, Trustee Reed and Trustee Moss, you've both spoken 2 times already.
Provide one small point. Trustee Bondar, I don't believe has spoken. Do you have anything to say? Okay. Okay. All right. All those in favor that the Board of Education repeal policy 503, interrogation or interviewing of students by police in school settings? Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, trustees. Okay, we're moving on to policy. Which order are we doing them in?
That's right.
Okay. Sorry, policy 142, superintendent's performance review, and policy 141, role of the superintendent amendment. Okay, so this is actually me. Okay. Pardon?
I'm happy to speak.
We can both do it, I guess. So basically, what happened was it's time coming up to do the superintendent's evaluation. We do that. We would do a small one yearly and then a big one periodically. And we found last year that trustees had a little bit of a hard time filling out the survey because there were some questions that were vague that were actually hard for us to answer because they weren't necessarily things that the superintendent reports to us on. So it's like, staff likes you. Well, how do we know? I mean, but it was more stuff like that where it was like, I don't know how he leads a team meeting. We're not in those meetings. So, we decided that it would be better to have the role of the superintendent be very, plain language, very specific, measurable by the board because it's the board evaluating the superintendent. So it's very hard for 7 people to get together and wordsmith a document. So we made a motion to do an ad hoc committee run by the secretary treasurer where trustees were asked if they wanted to participate in that committee. Trustee Swanky and I volunteered. And so we sat with the secretary treasurer through 3 sessions where we went through the document, we reordered stuff, we made into categories that we would be assessing. We got feedback from trustees. Trustee Westerby provided a whole bunch of edits at one point, which we did look at. Some of them, because you hadn't been in the meeting, the way you were changing them were different than the intended thing, but we did try to look at the language, so we did use some of that language. Trustee Bondar provided some feedback about making sure indigenizing curriculum was included as a point, which we added. And then, yeah, we went through and basically tried to make it, every single thing on there is something that the superintendent understands as being his role, like he understands what we're asking for, and that the board could also then evaluate. So that is what the policy 141 revisions were. And then policy 142, there's just one little change to it, which is it used to say in the 3rd year of their contract, and now it says once per strategic plan cycle, because the superintendent used to be hired on a 5-year term, and now the upper management contracts are ongoing. So instead of having it be just the 3rd year of their contract, it'll be an ongoing every 4 years-ish evaluation. So that just needed to be changed in that policy to reflect that new reality. Secretary Treasurer, did you have anything you want to add to that?
I don't. You covered everything. But if there's questions to the board, I can help with that too.
Trustee Swanky, did you have anything you want to add about the actual committee before we move on to the motion?
I would only highlight the input from the superintendent themselves in terms of lots of the substance of what was initially considered by the committee, and just to highlight that the recommendation before us is not at a step with expectations that he himself recognized as being imperative to the role.
Yes, a very good point. So the superintendent actually did do some work of looking at other districts and what they lay out as their superintendent's roles and responsibilities. And so we had language from a bunch of different districts that were put together, and we looked at them and changed things around. And then after we as a committee had gotten a document that we were happy with, we also let the superintendent see it so that he could provide feedback on whether he understood what we were talking about, so that we weren't creating a list of roles that he was like, what are you talking about? So yeah, that's basically it. Does anyone have any questions before we make the motion? Trustee Moss.
So my question is, I've never seen a superintendent's job description be put on a public board table for a board to vote on. This is labor, and we can't sit here and debate this. And so I don't understand what is happening here.
Respectfully, you have seen it, because it's a policy that we're rewriting. So the policy was in existence.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order, Chair. Would you please not contradict me? I have said I have never seen the job description of a superintendent come onto a public board meeting table. That's what I said.
Okay, and I'm just respectfully clarifying that policy 141 existed and had a list of roles and responsibilities of the superintendent and was passed at a public meeting. So this is reviewing and repassing an existing policy with new language. So yes, Secretary.
I would respectfully say I have. The Labor part would be doing the actual evaluation. Then it would be a matter of a personnel matter, which would need to be done in camera. The initial decision to establish a, what do we call it again, ad hoc committee was done in camera, but the results of it are being brought to a public board meeting. One of the most important governance roles of a school board, of actually any governance board, is the hiring and evaluation of the chief executive. That's what this is. It's coming to a public session because that should be discussed in the public realm as one of the most important elements of governance.
Okay, so Trustee Westerby.
Always sneaking in at the last second. It's more of a point of clarity before we move forward. I have recognizing that both Trustee Swanky and Trustee Rachel yourself have put in Rachel, put in a ton of time, and I wasn't able to make the meetings. I have a couple of just some of the wording changes that I mentioned. More about the word ensure and some of the words that are there, and it's a bit fulsome. So I'm just wondering about process going forward and how we're going to move forward for this.
Okay, so technically, you could amend the heck out of this. So I am going to tell you technically what you can do and then what I hope you're going to do. Okay, so technically you can amend the board trustee has the ability to amend like wild, as much as you want. So we did see many of your suggestions. We took some of them. When you have a committee, there's a lot of discussion about what words being used and why, and so this is not, I'm not saying this disrespectfully, but you weren't there, so you don't know why we chose those words, and it would be very time consuming to go each line by line and say why. But if there are any examples that you think are a barrier to this policy being effective, then you should amend. If it's just like, I would write this different, please don't. Because that would be very time consuming. But so that's basically it. Like, you have the right to, you have the right to make amendments. If it is just a stylistic thing, then I would say someone has to write it, and it was delegated to the committee. But if it's one, or if there's just some that you want to ask questions about because you don't know what it means, and then you should ask those questions now. This is your time.
So just to clarify, so if I were to want to make the motion to go back to amend, I apologize in advance. If that were something that I would consider, just for point of process sake, would that be something I would want to do now before we head into this motion?
If you're wanting to amend something, you would wait till after the motion was made to pass this, and then you would make an amendment. If you're wanting to just ask questions about individual things because you are not understanding them before we make the motion, that's fine. Okay. So, I guess I'm gonna make the motion just because, so if someone could put the motion up, I'll make it. And then we can talk about it. Oh no.
Policy 141, 5.3. Just click on that, yeah, that's right. Click on that link.
Further up, yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to move that the Board of Education amend policy 141, role of the superintendent as presented. Do I have a seconder? Trustee Bondar, thank you very much. Okay, so I'm going to speak to my motion since I made it. So as I said, we really spent a long time going through each line fairly laboriously and making sure that it made sense to us, those on the committee, and that it also made sense to the superintendent. That does not mean that if there was one that the trustees found was offensive or very bothersome in some way that someone could not make an amendment, please do. If there is something that is like, you're like, this cannot stand, I hate this line, I don't believe this should be there, that's fine. I would respectfully ask if it's just like, I would write this sentence differently if I was writing this, that you don't do that. But if it is like one where you don't understand it or you think it's actually a bad point to have, then you should make an amendment. But that is my thing. I think it's really good. I think it's much better than the one we had before. I think each line is like understandable and followable by the superintendent and also measurable by the board in a way that our old one was not, because it was too vague and it made it a confusing thing to try to assess our superintendent. Trustee Westerby.
All right. Okay. So I did email some amendments to Secretary Treasurer for us to review. If the Secretary Treasurer could please put them up. The main ones are just the active language around some of the words ensure. The word ensure can sometimes imply some sort of absolute guarantee. So the words like ensure facilities accommodate the diverse needs of students. Ensure that trustees are informed by the same impartial information. I find that they potentially could be more action oriented. So, yeah.
Sorry, yes.
If I'm understanding correctly, the members made a motion to amend and now they're starting to advance it. It has not yet been seconded. The motion to amend?
Oh, no. Sorry.
Privilege, I prefer to see it. So
Yes, if we could get Trustee Westerby's suggestions put up, then Trustee, just put on the screen so we can see what we're talking about. Trustee Westerby, you can then make a motion to amend it And only if you have a seconder do you get to talk to your amendments.
And I will, I'd like to make a motion to,
Sorry.
I will wait.
Just loose cannons tonight.
I know,
Trustee
just firing all
Westerby,
cylinders.
are you presenting the same things that you sent us before? Okay.
No.
We did go through them.
Yes, I appreciate it.
So can I just clarify, is your amendment to basically just change the word ensure throughout the document?
I either change the word ensure to more active language or with the same wording, or number 1.5, I actually felt we should expand into more action-oriented things that can best ensure, but since we can't guarantee it and it's always an active target, I feel like using the word ensure would, it implies some sort of guarantee that we can't hold the superintendent to. We can hold him to the actions that he's doing in the district, but we can't hold him to the outcomes necessarily, especially when it comes to informing us. Like he can't guarantee that we are all equally informed. He can guarantee that he's provided us with the same information.
Point of order, Chair. Point of order.
Yes, what's your point of order?
My point of order is the deliberations over the content of this policy of the superintendent's job description was done in camera. And now what's happening here should actually also be in camera, because now we're talking about changing this, and the actual document that was discussed was done in camera.
Okay,
This
your
is
point of order is rejected because that's not true. It wasn't done in camera. It was done as an ad hoc committee. So,
Excuse me, so Secretary Treasurer, didn't you not say that the discussion took place in camera?
no.
I misunderstood that you had said that then.
Sorry, the motion to strike an ad hoc committee occurred in camera. The actual ad hoc committee was not in camera. So Trustee Westerby, I just needed to know what you're doing. So just to clarify, that whole 1.5 and all those sub things, are things you want to add?
I feel like potentially.
Okay, no, you're not speaking to it. I'm just asking that question.
Okay. Yes.
Does Trustee Westerby have a seconder for his extensive amendment? Does Trustee Westerby have a seconder? Now, Trustee Westerby, you can speak to your amendment.
Thank you. I appreciate that this is extra labor and that maybe not everybody's up for it. I just wanted to make sure all the language is consistent with active language and what the superintendent's role is. Ensuring, in my opinion, implies some sort of absolute guarantee or responsibility that may not necessarily be feasible or appropriate. And policy should focus on clear directives and actions without overstating the level of certainty or control. So I just want to make sure it's pragmatic in tone.
Oh, Trustee. Yes.
For the purpose of the minutes, I'm not super clear on how the amendment is going to read. So that it would start that the policy is amended to read. And then I could go 1.3 and down, but I don't think 1.3 has the amendment in it.
Yes, promote learning environment.
So we use the dash.
So the points below it are the amendments for each of those points? Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Trustee Swank.
If I may, Chair, suggest a course of action, perhaps this can even be done with unanimous consent. The board is reviewing other 100 series policy on April 2nd. I'm wondering if we could table this conversation to review at that time. And then it would, of course, come back to a public meeting where it would be more fully deliberated upon. My thought is that for many members, this is the first time they're seeing these, and it might be beneficial to give it a more fulsome review and to actually get a clean copy.
Okay, I am not opposed to that idea right now. It's just, I do have some thoughts about it, which are, we're trying to actually get the superintendent's review done in a timely fashion. I respect, Trustee Westerby, your desire to have a lot of input into this policy. This was delegated to an ad hoc committee, which we spent like a lot of hours, and I feel like it's a little bit, it was a lot of work, and having someone come back and basically themselves rewrite it, I feel like if you wanted this much input, if a person wanted this much input into it, then perhaps they should have been on the ad hoc committee. So that's sort of my feeling, because it was like we delegated to a committee to then bring back to the board to then do the work so we could get this done. I'm not necessarily against tabling it though if the rest of the board would like it. So if someone wants to make a motion to table it, that someone can do that. My thing would be to not pass the amendment and to go back to the motion as it was on the floor, but that's just my personal opinion.
Sorry.
Trustee Prosser.
So based on that, it was amendment that was, or it was seconded. We need to vote on that, and if it dies, then we can go back to the first motion.
That's correct.
So we should do that.
Trustee Reed.
I have a question regarding timeline. If we table it to the April 2nd, I believe Trustee Swanky said, would we still have the time if we pass it at that point to do the review in a timely manner? I understand it would make the timeline tighter. Is it still something that we could do in a fulsome and thoughtful way?
I believe it is possible. It is possible. It just ideally would be done now, but it's not impossible to do that. Trustee Westerby.
Thank you. Yeah, and I just want to recognize that everything that's here is really great, and I had provided feedback already as indicated about wanting everything to be feeling, in my opinion, that everything should be active tone. I don't necessarily know if every trustee had the ability to hear my feedback originally, and also I was not given the opportunity to provide feedback on this revision, which is this opportunity right now. So I appreciate the opportunity to have this reviewed, and I feel like I've said why I think it's important. So I hope the trustees understand my perspective. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any motion to table right now, so I'm going to
Chair,
ask
I'm
for
moving to table this to refer to a later date.
a seconder to table the motion.
A quick point of privilege. Can I get a snapshot of the timeline again?
So if this gets tabled, then it would come back at the next public board meeting.
Just a quick point of privilege. We were mentioned something about needing to reach a certain timeline. I just want to clarify.
Oh, it's just we do need to get the superintendent review done before the end of the school year, so that's all. It just gives us a shorter amount of time to get that done. That's not really, there's 2 more months still after that. It's not the end of the world. Yes, it would still get done. Do we have a seconder to table the motion? Trustee Reed?
I'll second the motion.
Okay, trustees, so, Trustee Moss, did you want to speak to your
To the motion?
Just table
Yes,
the
I
motion?
do. Yes, I do. So, since all trustees need to feel like they own a piece of this, and but I would suggest that this goes to a learning session, not to the next public board meeting, so that the trustees can have a fulsome conversation about their one employee's job description. And since this was done in an ad hoc committee, I think there are some trustees who are feeling like they have the need to speak into this and should be provided that opportunity.
Trustee Swank.
Just to state that I'll vote in favor of tabling it. In my view, it would be nice to have consensus on this, the path forward, and it sounds like we can work within the timeline. That is not in any way to diminish what I thought was consensus and a strong piece of policy work. just to say I think consensus on the path forward is more important than kind of making that decision clear today.
Trustee Reed?
Yeah, I just speak in favor of tabling the motion. I'm so appreciative of all the work that the ad hoc committee did. I know that you put so much time and effort into it, and everything reads beautifully. And the intention is great. I just remember how much difficulty we had with that review process, and I want to be sure that we have something that we can be absolutely confident in. So I would like more time to review the potential amendments, and considering we do have a couple months' time after that meeting, so.
Yeah, and I will also vote in favor of tabling. I think tonight, if I was to vote, I would vote against the amendment. Perhaps if I look at it, and I will suddenly be like, this is amazing, and I'll change my mind. So I think it's better to, rather than rush through an amendment that we haven't had a chance to look at, I think that it does make sense for us to have a chance to look at that, bring those to another meeting. So I'm fine with that as well. All those in favor of tabling this discussion till the next meeting? Opposed?
Next meeting. Is there any consideration for doing this in a learning?
Well, sorry, we have to table the motion that has been moved and seconded
Okay,
until the
so
next
let's
meeting.
table the motion. No, but you don't need, my motion was not to the next meeting. My motion was to, table the motion, to refer it to a later date, not to the next public board meeting.
Okay, I guess maybe I did not know that. So apparently the motion was just to table it to some random meeting, not to the next public meeting. So,
Point of order.
so was everybody clear what the motion was? Because I was not clear that that was what the motion was. So I think rather than record the votes, we should just be clear that the motion on the floor was to table it to a future meeting. I would like to propose an amendment, which is to table this until the next public board meeting.
You can only table to the same meeting later, I think.
Oh, is it, so refer? Oh, so.
Yeah, this is the one that's happening. I don't-
I believe that the motion that's on the floor is not what people thought was on the floor. So, I think that there's broad consensus in the room to have this picked up at the next public meeting. I do not necessarily believe there's broad consensus in the room for what Trustee Maws apparently meant. So what I believe we should do, just for the sake of clarity, this is what I'm suggesting. We should vote on what Trustee Maws is saying. And then if that doesn't pass, we should then do a motion to refer to the next public board meeting, because that's what we all thought we were voting on. So, yes.
I guess point of order, I feel like this.
Oh, sorry,
Right.
oh, yes, sorry, Trustee Reed, did you know what you were seconding when you seconded it? Because sorry, can we just pause for, I just need 2 minutes recess because I don't understand what the process is right now. So I just want to make sure the votes are recorded properly. So we're just going to look in Robert's rules. 2 minutes. Everybody, I'm calling this meeting back to order. Secretary Treasurer, who is our parliamentarian, has made a ruling on what's going on here.
Okay, so there are two of us taking notes on motions over here, and we both had lay on the table, or I table. Lay on the table means to put on the table the same table for a future meeting. And because this is a board policy, it is an important board policy that needs to be debated in public, it would come back to this venue for a future approval, whatever happens. So I'd suggest that that motion probably is something that you wanted, but it sounds like you had a second motion that you also wanted, right? That would be a second motion. And that would be?
Okay, well, in the meantime, though, we need to pass, now this one has been moved and seconded then. We've clarified that what was moved was that this be tabled until a future meeting. No, I said when I rephrased it, next meeting, a future meeting is what was actually said. That was seconded by Trustee Reed. It was debated. So we're gonna vote on that the Board of Education table this until a future meeting. All those in favor? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, so. Okay, great.
So that's passed
4 to 3, yes. Okay,
So is there a second motion?
I don't know.
So the motion that I would make is that the board refer this policy discussion to a committee of the whole, date to be decided.
Is there a seconder for that motion?
Point of privilege, what do we have now?
So right.
Would the future meeting be next month? That would probably put us in a tight time frame.
It's been approved though.
We already passed. Sorry. Oh no, I haven't been.
I'm so wrong.
Sorry for everyone who wasn't didn't get to hear me talking. Basically, the motion that's passed is this discussion we're having is tabled until a future meeting. It will come back to the board table. It has been moved and seconded, and then an amendment was moved and seconded. So we would have to either pass or not pass the amendment, and then once we've either passed or not passed that, we'd go back to debating the main motion. In the meantime, Trustee Maas now has also passed or is moving that the discussion before it comes to a future public meeting goes to a committee of the whole, which would be all trustees would discuss it before it comes back to the board table.
So I would like to second that.
Okay.
Speak to that. I would like to second that and then speak to that.
Okay.
Because.
Wait, hold on. So now Trustee Maas has made her motion, and then you'll get a chance to speak to it. Trustee Maas.
So in order to have a fulsome conversation, the board needs to meet in a closed setting, committee of the whole, to be able to fully debate, or not debate, but have a fulsome conversation so that all trustees feel like their voices have been heard, and all the boxes are checked, all the concerns are addressed, before we move forward with our most important job description in the school district. That's
Trustee Prose?
Okay, but here's the problem. Our Chair, here's the situation. We've just had a meeting, we've had it before us, and then it's skewered now. And so now we're having another meeting and we're gonna get together again in a public meeting and if somebody else, if it gets skewered again, then we're in the same boat. The problem is that we got a lot of, like, this has been before us. We all knew it was there. It was clean. And we need to stop, like, we need to be careful. I'm not saying it's not good to do very clear overview, but we need to be careful that we just don't, like, take this work and then just put a knife through it without any consultation or without thinking about the impacts of it. Because now, if we don't do what Heather does, we're not going to get this done in time. We're going to go to the next meeting, and then I might have a word that I don't like, and then that goes to if I'm convincing enough, then all of a sudden people will vote, and then all of a sudden we'll be at the same position. I just think that this has gotten way out of hand, and I think that we should do what Heather says. Like, let's have a meeting next week, and let's put it back together. So the next board, everybody's happy. We present it to the public. We put our stamp of approval on it, and everybody smiles, and we love each other again.
Great. Yeah, does anyone else have anything to say? Trustee Bond.
I would just reiterate the point that the conversation has been had, the meeting has been had. Request for committee members went out to all trustees. Only 2 trustees joined the committee. The committee was formed and those 2 trustees did the work. We are now here with the product of their work, in addition to the feedback that other trustees provided by email. That's where I see we're at. Thanks.
Yeah, I personally am going to vote against the motion to refer, just because I think we voted that the process we were going to do was to strike an ad hoc committee and then bring it to the public board meeting. I do think it's important, well, I agreed to table it so that everyone had a chance to look at the proposed amendment, so that we weren't voting on this without any thought or whatever, so that people have some time to consider whether the amendment is a good one. I personally don't want to spend any more hours of my life wordsmithing this document, which I've already spent hours and hours of my life doing. So I don't really want to do that personally at another committee. That's just me and my time. If I have to, I will show up and do it, but I don't want to. So I'm going to vote against referring it to a committee, but I have voted. It is getting tabled. I'm happy to look at it again next month or whenever at a future board meeting, but I'm not going to vote to refer to committee.
So one more, sorry.
Yeah.
So a question then, so what are we gonna do different? Like, the next board meeting, what are we gonna do differently? Like, what are we gonna do that's gonna be different than what we did tonight? Like, what are we gonna get together, and is the committee gonna get together? I'm just trying to understand the process of what it will look like for next meeting.
Okay, so I can answer that. So if the motion that's on the table right now passes, we're all gonna get together. We're all gonna talk about it like we were one big committee instead of the ad hoc committee that got formed, and we're gonna go through this document until everyone's happy with it, and then it'll come back to the board table again, and we'll, hopefully at that point everyone will be happy because we'll all have talked about it. If that doesn't happen and this motion fails, then exactly what's been presented to you tonight will get re-presented, including the proposed amendment, but you'll have had time to think about it before you vote on the amendment. So that's your choice. You either want it to get referred to a committee where we all talk about it as a whole group and make sure we're all, or you are voting against referring it to that committee, in which case you are either happy with the ad hoc committee's work that was presented, or you're happy with that plus the amendment that was presented tonight and you're fine with not talking about it anymore. So that's your choices.
But if I can just put a clarification, Chair, is what difference is it going to be in the next meeting? Then what difference will it be if we're not going to get together and work it through? Like, I just need to, I'm trying to understand the process, because I'm almost tempted to make an amendment to ignore all the other amendments and then vote on this.
You sort of, I believe, missed your chance because we've tabled it. You can't really do that in one. Okay. Yeah, sadly.
Would you be able to clarify that? Could you clarify that for me, Willow? Just a little, or sorry, Trustee Rochelle?
Yeah, I guess I'm trying to clarify. I guess maybe I'm not quite understanding your question. So basically, I brought forward this motion. I was happy with the policy we were presenting tonight. I was like, groovy, let's pass this. one trustee has said, I would like some different language. They've proposed an amendment, which is fully within their right to do. That was seconded. The amendment was very extensive. So some trustees did not feel like they'd had time to look at that amendment and make a decision tonight on whether it was either good or bad. So it has now been tabled for that whole discussion for next time. In the meantime, Trustee Moz would like us to go and have a whole other full group discussion about this. Okay, so if Trustee Moz's motion passes, we are going to get together as a whole board and look at this policy together as a whole board. If her motion fails, then the motion that I brought forward will be back on the table, but we're in the middle of discussing an amendment that was proposed by Trustee Westerby. So we would first discuss that. We would either say, we love your changes, Trustee Westerby, we're passing that, and then we would pass the whole thing with those changes, or actually on further thought, after taking this back, Trustee Westerby, we've looked at it, we don't like those, we're gonna defeat the amendment, and then we're gonna go back to the original thing that was proposed tonight. That's what you're voting on. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I could speak to Heather's motion, I would support that only on one principle, is that I would like to do exactly that, get together. Oh, sorry. I would support the motion of Heather's motion because I think it would eliminate this problem for next time.
Trustee Reed, I saw you.
Yeah, I would like to speak against referring to a committee of the whole, because I was happy with the work that the ad hoc committee did. I went over it in detail, and I felt that the spirit was there. Trustee Westerby made a great point with some language, what I was able to see before we moved to table it, and I would like to consider that, and I think that it will give us plenty of time to read over that amendment, to reread the original, and I feel confident that I will go into the next meeting with those two things to weigh, and I'm comfortable that we have the solution there. I don't think that we'll be going in and be opening some Pandora's box of language, and that's just my belief, my understanding. That's what I'd like to see happen. So that's why I will vote against it, but I'm happy that we're moving it to a future meeting.
Trustee West.
I would have loved to have been more involved in this process up until now, and I had no intentions of this being delayed so much, but unfortunately I wasn't available during the times that were made available, so I wouldn't want anyone to feel forced to be on this committee, but I would love a chance to speak further into it, so as pointed out, we can just pass this quickly next time, and I can be rest assured that everyone's had a chance to weigh in on my opinion, so I guess point of privilege, question, clarification is everyone forced to be on a committee of the whole?
Yes. Okay. All those in favor that the board refer this discussion to a committee of the whole prior to a future board meeting? Opposed? Motion defeated. Okay, so we're moving, oh wait, so now we're moving on to, so policy 141 is tabled to the next meeting. Policy 142, superintendent's performance review. I am prepared to make this motion. I really briefly explained it before. So it is that the Board of Education amend policy 142, superintendent performance review as presented. The change is simply to change it from saying in the extensive review in the third year to each strategic planning cycle. Seconded by Trustee Swanky. Any discussion, trustees? Let's see. Oh, Trustee Moss.
And so for clarity, for anybody reading this, what is the strategic planning cycle? What is the length of time for that?
The strategic plan lasts 4 years, so once within each strategic plan span of 4 years, there would be an extensive performance review of the superintendent. Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor that the Board of Education amend policy 142, superintendent's performance review as presented? Opposed? Motion carries. Okay. Now, we're moving on to middle school academic reading and math skills report. This is a motion by Trustee Moss.
So I'll start by putting the motion on the table. Is that the pleasure of the board? That's what I just said. If that's the pleasure of the board, I'll start by doing that. Thank you. So that the superintendent provide a report to the board on the academic reading and math skills in middle school students since the grade reconfiguration was implemented in our school district. This should include cohorts from before and after grade reconfiguration was implemented. The Chance Alternate Middle School's student population should be included in this data as the school was closed at the same time that the grade reconfiguration took place. And then further, please provide a timeline for when the board will receive this report. That is my motion.
Does Trustee Moss have a seconder? Trustee Prost? Okay, Trustee Moss, you can speak to your motion.
So, before I read the actual rationale that I've got here, you know, this is the meat and potatoes of what we do. This is the most, I'm going to say, the most important thing we do in the school district. And over the years, I have seen courses change, methods change, money put in, more money put in, and I would like to be assured that at some point we're going back in time and we're looking at where we spent the money and the decisions that we made, and if in fact we are on the right track in terms of going forward and we are actually improving the reading and math skills of our middle school students. And so, as my rationale says, several fundamental changes, as I've just said, to the delivery of educational services, and it provide us with a differentiated approach to the acquisition of fundamental reading and math skills for different age groups in our district. It's important for the board to understand how the changes have affected reading and math skills in our students, especially when we vote on the budget and we're deciding where we're spending money, and if we're going to get bang for our buck, I'm going to say. So yeah, I'm not going to bother reading the rest. I basically paraphrased that. So that is my intent. I would hope that we would find that we're on the right track and that we are working in the right direction to provide these kids with adequate, at least adequate reading and math skills. So that is my motion and my rationale.
Trustees? Trustee Moss, can you push your button? Proceed.
Yeah, so when I saw this on the board, I was my question, and I don't know if this question goes to the superintendent, but do we have reading our SNAP reports and all these things? Are those accessible to our board? And how does that work? If you can maybe just fill me in on some of those details. I just don't know. I think the questions are excellent in the sense that I would like to know too, because that's the only way we can really gauge progress. So I would just like to know how does the public know how we navigate reading and writing skills and marks and stuff like that.
Superintendent?
Thank you.
Thank you, through the chair. Trustee Prosy. So first of all is that, just really quickly, just give some summary information to provide some context, and then I can answer a question. First of all, discussions at the board table during reconfiguration took place from February 21st, 2017 to 2019, May. There were 52 action items, information items in board packages since then. 52 action information items in board packages. Since then, we have presented 3 framework of enhancing student reports. That's what we normally present in September. And then Assistant SIPs would make a presentation at the working session in the month of August. If you recall, the one we had last August was extensive, almost 3 hours, itemized, went through all of the scores, diligently. That's been done 3 times, as required by ministry policy and ministerial reporting order. We've also shared information regarding literacy data from K to 12 with this Board of Education and previous boards at learning sessions, and those are the learning sessions that we have, and there's information there they can go back and double check. These reports have contained information about our literacy rates, including FSA, local assessments, and graduation assessments, literacy 10 and literacy 12. So the next piece is that if the board determines that it requires the data for before and after reconfiguration, and the board has done their due diligence, going through all of the analysis of information that's been presented up till now since reconfiguration, to an analysis, then I'll be happy to bring back any information to the Board of Education around pre and post data considerations. I hope that answers the question.
Trustee Reed?
I'm not inherently opposed to more information, but my hesitation with this motion is that we receive extensive reports on everything every year, the strategic plan. We have the working session in the summer where we sat down and we asked for hours and hours, and I asked so many questions, and you had so much information for me, and you reframed it, and anything that we couldn't get in that moment was given back to us. And I feel like I think I don't understand why this particular framing is different from what we've already received and what the outcome would be. If let's say that it's showing that we're not doing as well since this moment, are we going to go back to this system? Is that what our desired outcome is? If not, then I want our children to read and do math better. I don't know that this is the block of information I need to make the best decision, if that's clear.
Does anyone else want to speak? I have something to say, but I don't want to jump in. Okay, I'm going to speak to this. If this was just a thing asking for a report for the last 5 years of academic reading and math skills in middle school, I wouldn't have a problem with it. Although we've gotten that report multiple times in many different ways, but I wouldn't have a problem with it. I think that this motion is just, I can't support it because it does this strange thing of equating correlation to causation, which is just not the way the world works. To choose one thing and then another thing and say they're somehow cause and effect is just, it doesn't make sense. And frankly, I could think of a dozen things randomly off the top of my head that happen over that same time span and ask for a report based on that. I could say, I want the reading and math scores since housing prices became unaffordable in Chilliwack.
Point of order, Chair. So you're not speaking to the motion?
Yes, I am.
No, you're not.
I very much am. I could say, I want, I would like reading and math scores since smartphones
Point of order, Chair. You're not speaking to the motion.
I am very much speaking to the motion. Your point of order is overruled. So I feel like this motion to say, I want the reading and math scores since grade reconfiguration just doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense. Are you saying that reading and math scores have gone down because of grade reconfiguration? There's no evidence that those two things are correlated like in any way. Reading and math scores are down internationally over the last 5 years. Every single country in the world except Estonia and Singapore. I've looked it up. So are we going to say that somehow like Chilliwack's grade reconfiguration affected reading and math scores in France? Like, I don't think so. So I think that this is just a very ill-conceived motion, and I can't support it. Trustee Westerby.
Thank you. Yeah, I do see the importance of data, and I've actually been requesting several times to staff to bring forward data to the board to not only show the rationale for making decisions, but also to show how the improvements are along the way. I know we've had lots of chats about research, And I actually would like to request the chair through the staff to, if they'd be willing to indicate what kind of research is currently being done on studying the academic reading and math skills in middle school students throughout the changes that are being implemented in the district. Because I know we've had this conversation before, and I agree that it's really important to do. So I'm just wondering if the staff would be willing to speak to the current research that's being done on academic and reading and math skills right now in middle school students.
Yeah, assistant superintendents probably can speak a little bit to the way we're testing and how we're looking at data.
We'll try this one. Okay, yeah, I can speak a little bit to, definitely we're looking at improving our analytics and research. The big project we're doing right now that we're really studying is the elementary literacy collaboration project. So really, we're going to be looking really this year at grade 2 and 3 reading. That's going to be that's the big project we're doing right now, and see what the impact is. I think your question was more around what are we doing? Are we measuring our middle school piece? We're going right now. We're going to go 2 feet really deeply into this elementary literacy collaboration. As the board knows, we've put about a $1.5 million worth of staffing towards that project, and that's the one that we've been talking about really coming out and spending a lot of time and effort on doing a deep dive in. And so that's going to be our first real foray into doing some deep analysis, as opposed to generally we provide the board with a summary of our year-end achievement, and that's sort of looking at the data from a 5,000-foot level, which we've shared, as Superintendent Arul-Pergasm said, in all of our recent FESL updates. And in previous to FESL, we had we call district achievement DAC. Different district achievement contracts. So we do have that data as well from previous, but those are that year-end summative piece. So I think what Trustee Westerby is mentioning is that we're going deep with more of an analytics approach. That's what we're going to be rolling out as a report in June for the board on that project. So yes, we're going deep, but we can't go deep on everything, and we definitely can't go deep on everything all at once. So that's sort of an update on that, if that helps.
So just to follow up then, it sounds like we are doing thorough, consistent research and data collection on the consistent improvement of our reading and math skills, and the differences in what we're implementing. So I guess if I may, a point of clarity from the presenter, if the current research would satisfy this motion, or if not, what is it exactly that the presenter is looking for from this data, so I can get a clear idea of what's the intent.
Trustee Moss, do you want to answer that?
Is this going to be considered my second time speaking?
No, you're answering the questions.
Okay, thank you. So what I'm asking for here, what I'm talking about are comparative results. I'm not talking about the big long scale. I'm talking about what were the results before we went into grade reconfiguration. That was a very big deal that took place in this school district. It was a big event. It was very costly. And we also closed chance alternate schools. So what I'm asking is a comparative for what did our results look like then compared to what our results look like now. That's what I'm asking. I'm not asking for a big long scale. I'm asking for a comparative, because well, that's for the next motion. But the amount of money that was spent on grade reconfiguration was a lot. I don't even know how much. And so what I'm asking is a comparative. So what did our reading and math skills look like before, and what do they look like now? Pre and post. Thanks.
Follow up.
Yeah.
Yeah, I just was wondering if someone could please speak to clarify what the grade reconfiguration was and when it happened, and was it a ministry mandate or was it something that we did ourselves?
again, I can bring back a report if desired. I'm going to try and give you a very high level analysis. It was based on academic achievement. It was based on relationships and pillars for middle school. And the third big piece was around the fact that growing enrollment, which is the third piece. But again, if the board so desires, we can bring back a summary report of all the work that went on, including the 53 information sessions that were presented to the Board of Education, to provide the board with the context of what transpired.
Just to clarify from my memory, partly, anyways, the current grades that we have are more in line with the middle school model, because middle schools are supposed to like provide a bridge between elementary and junior high. So school districts that actually implemented middle schools from the ground up already had 6 to 8, but because we had junior highs, we just kept the grades the way they were. And so this was more like finally actually doing what we'd started 20 years ago with the wrong grades, kind of. And then I wasn't on the board then, but it was partly our elementary schools were just so full that it took a grade out of the elementary schools and moved them. So is that correct?
I just want to, this is just like Trustee Miles, I think what you're asking is, the one issue is that all the measurements have changed. So for instance, the FSA changed demonstrably in 2019. And so the FSA, what we could compare is, say, grade 7 scores in students from 2016 to students today. But the assessment is so different that the ministry actually doesn't correlate them anymore. Back in that, at that point in time, we didn't have PM benchmarks at middle school. We do now, but we didn't then, so we aren't able to assess PM benchmarks. Back in 2015, we had percentages and letter grades at our junior high, middle schools. Now we have a performance scale, so we can't really compare that. So I'm not saying that we couldn't do something, but I'm just worried that whatever we produce won't actually point to. It won't really be able to tell the story because the measures are so changed. So that's my, we could do something on attendance. We could do something like, there are some other measures potentially, but I think the academic measures have changed so much that comparing them would be really difficult. Just
Trustee Bonner has a question.
Oh yeah, not a question so much as just it seems that this report would not add anything. In fact, it would likely cloud what we may understand. The grade reconfiguration happened, gosh, my second was caught in it, so 7-8 years ago now. Since then, we've gone through a global pandemic. We are in, a crisis of attendance. And so in addition to the time that staff would need to do to create this, it would not provide any kind of a summary about comparative statistics that you are asking for. Selecting one factor and deciding that that factor is all you need for comparative analysis is just pseudoscience. That is inappropriate and looking for what you are.
Trustee Moss?
I said point of order.
Yes, what is your point
The
of order?
characterization of what I am trying to do here is disrespectful, at the very least.
Trustee Moss, I will uphold your point of order only in that don't direct your comments to Trustee Moss.
To select one factor as if it could potentially be causing something else is just fishing for something that you are already decided that you'd like to find, and it's a waste of time. We don't need it. The FESL
Point of order, Chair.
The FESL
Again, putting words in my mouth that I did not say at all.
Didn't refer to you at all.
I think he used the pronoun you, which was what she was. I realized it was. I wasn't going to say, but
to have nature, in my view, is not a good use of our resources or time. Thank you.
Trustee Westerby.
Thank you. I really appreciate the information that was provided because it really gave me a lot of clarity as to what it is that this intention is. I actually think that the academic reading and skills and math skills are available. Is that my understanding? So is it possible that this information can be found somewhere? So could potentially just the board be sent that link and that would be that?
Superintendent, there we have the ability to show, like we have that available in reports we've gotten before, correct?
That's correct. We can easily quickly go back and find all the reports and send all the links to members of the Board of Education. They've been partly embedded within all of your memos from previous weeks, as well as learning sessions, as well as public board meetings. So that can be summarized.
Trustee Moss, did you want to close out?
Thank you. I don't consider this to be an ill-conceived motion. And I'm actually very disappointed in the purposeful mischaracterization of the intent of this motion made by some members of this board. I am quoting what the chair said. Thank you. So I will simply say that we are at a dangerous crossroads with our students and their reading and math skills, especially in middle school. And I think any kind of information that we can garner about a practice that we used to use that was perhaps working better than what we're using now, although I don't know, and that's why I'm asking the question. But it's important for us to know the information, especially when we're voting to spend money on these new ideals that we're looking at. Kids have right now, they have here and now, they don't have time for us to try this or try that. That's why history is important. When we look back and we see what we were doing, was it working, was it not working, what are we doing now, what are the scores of the children?
All those in favor that the superintendent provide a report to the board on the academic reading and math skills in middle school students since the grade reconfiguration was implemented in our district, and include also information about chance alternate as presented. Opposed? Motion defeated. Okay, trustees, it is 8:23. We have one action item, we have public participation, we have a superintendent update. The next agenda for April is quite full already, so I am going to ask for a motion to extend the meeting.
So I'll move that the meeting be extended till the conclusion of the adopted agenda.
Do I have a seconder? All those in favor that we extend the meeting until the conclusion of our business tonight? Opposed? Okay, motion carries. Sorry about that, trustees. Okay, so we're moving on to 5.5, elementary school academic reading and math skills report.
So the motion is that the superintendent provide a report to the board on the academic reading and math acquisition skills in elementary school students since the closure of the pull-out programs at Bernard and McCammon Elementary. This report will be for all elementary schools and should include all cohorts. Please provide a timeline for when the board will receive this report.
Is there a seconder for Trustee Maws's motion? Trustee Prose. Trustee Maws?
So we are now embarking on a new process of push-in where we don't have specialized classrooms for students to attend from different schools, where they receive intensive care, intensive teaching in reading and math skills for grades, I believe it was 2 and 3 primarily. At one time we had 4 of those schools, and then we had 2, and now we have none. We actually have no specialized classrooms in the school district for teaching students who are struggling with reading. So we're going on a different track where we've got a group of teachers who are now going into all the schools, and this is called the push-in model. And so what I want to know is, where are we at? Comparatively speaking to, and I said cohorts because the students who took part in those programs at Bernard and McCammon Elementary, and I know this is way before everybody's time here, but I want to know what the scores were then compared to now. And this is a province-wide thing of the whole push-in. And so somebody should look at the evidence of whether or not the programs that did the pullout and the programs that are doing the push-in are garnering success for our students, especially our elementary school aged children. Because if you don't catch them early and you leave it till it's much later, then they really struggle to be successful in school overall. So that's it.
Before we entertain questions or comments from other trustees, I just have a question. What year were the pull-out programs at McCammon and Bernard ended?
May 2021.
Thank you.
I just have a point of privilege, and again, if Chair will allow it, I noticed that there was some misinformation shared, and the staff were saying that wasn't accurate. So I was just wondering if allowed, that there could be some accuracy.
No, I think Trustee Ma's had it correct with the we don't have any classrooms, but she then went on to say that we do have 10 teachers right now pushing into schools, providing that service to schools directly. So I think that was probably what you were picking up on.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Can we also just clarify that there is push in and there is also pull out that's happening at student schools, so they're not having to leave their school to go to another community to attend the classes that we previously had. And I do believe that we've made some presentations along the way that provided some data with respect to some of the cohorts at McCammon and Bernard before then COVID happened. We had some learnings in COVID as well that provided some insights into why we wanted to move in a different direction.
And if I could just add this last piece, and this is around the type of data. I mentioned in the middle school how the assessments have changed. In reading, it hasn't. So the reading, our PM benchmarks have been traditionally what we've used. So we wouldn't have a problem with you're comparing apples to apples when it comes to the type of assessment. So, thank you.
Trustee Swain.
Thank you. Question as well through the chair to staff. The motion proposes that this was a program, and I've understood district programs to be defined under policy 370. Am I right to think of this more as a practice or a targeted intervention rather than a district program?
I need to make a point of order before we carry on, and that is that while I appreciate the comments of our two assistant superintendents, the programs at Bernard and McCammon were full-time. The kids went there all day, every day, except for Fridays. And so it's not the same as taking kids out and having like learning assistants and then going back into their classroom. That's apples and oranges. So just for a point of clarification.
Steve Person, or is that just because the superintendents were? Okay.
No, I actually,
go ahead.
I wanted to speak in favor of this motion for the reason that it's a simple process of getting that data. And so I think it's more of a process that we can actually look at and compare, where the other motion was a lot more difficult and it was actually the other motion was impossible to analyze. Where this motion here, I think it's a simple process that you could probably give us the information on that. Thank you.
Trustee Wester.
Thank you. I fully appreciate what both the previous motion and this motion are trying to achieve, and I again really harp on the importance of data collection and proving what we're doing is effective. And I've shared that numerous times. I think you've all probably tired of hearing me say that, but I think what's important to mention is that research and data on its own is not, as indicated by both chair and vice chair, is not enough on its own. You can compare, ice cream sales to boat crashes and think that ice cream's causing boat crashes, but you're missing out a very important data about why those things happen at the same time. So I think that academic and reading in math schools are important. I think that if we just reported on those, we'd be missing massive amounts of information as to why the data is the way it is. So I don't think that this could be amended to achieve that goal the way that I think would be ethical, to have research done and presented in a way that actually provides us data we need. So I would love to have a conversation potentially later about how we can achieve this data and make sure our students are doing well across the board and making sure our programs are hitting the mark.
I'm going to speak against this for the same exact reason that I spoke against the last motion, which is that I don't believe it makes any sense whatsoever to look at 2 points of data and imply that there's some sort of causation. So in 2021, we stopped a very specific way of teaching reading, and it was the middle of a pandemic. So if we see that our reading scores have gone down, are we going to say it's because we stopped the two program, like that program? It makes no sense to me whatsoever. Now, we do get reading reports that are given to us every single year by the superintendent and assistant superintendents. We even got a very fulsome report recently on the reading interventions that are being done by our 10 reading support teachers, in which we talked about how much on average kids' reading scores improve. That was presented to the board. So it is, like I say, I mean, to take this piece of data, anything where we're comparing like pre-2020 to now, it just, I'm sorry, we had a huge national, international crisis that's affected everything. I just don't understand the point of this data. I think it is, and to be clear, I thought that those programs were pretty good. I did see when I was teaching, I saw kids really improve. I also know that there was some problems with kids feeling connected to their school and suddenly getting sent out to another school and then only coming back one day and being the kid who very obviously was only there one day a week. I think there were some problems with that, with stigmatization. I also did see kids' reading scores improve. But I understand why we're probably looking at other ways to do that now in a modern era. So I do understand the attachment to those programs because I did see them work and be effective. But at the same time, I can see when we're trying to do a more inclusive model that supports at a kid's school, if they're done effectively, could be better. So I think it's more important for us to be looking at how are our kids reading now. We're doing interventions. When we get a kid, we sign them up that they are going to get this intervention. Are they improving in reading, or are they staying the same? And if they're not improving in reading, then that's something we need to know about. We do need those reports, but to compare, like I say, anything pre-pandemic to post-pandemic and suggest that something else was directly responsible, I just don't think is a responsible thing to do. So I would definitely vote against this motion. Trustee Reed?
Yeah, oh, sorry. My brain just blanked for a split second there. I have 3 kids that have the flu. We're very tired today. I think that I'm struggling to see how I would apply this data from a governance lens. It's not my job as a trustee to determine specifically which reading programs are implemented, although we do provide direction and we provide this potentially would inform the strategic plan and how we would state our values and our mission and things and such, and we do want information on the programs being done, but it's not my job to create curriculum, and it's not really my job to be in the schools and dictating what our staff are necessarily doing. So I just from this particular lens, I do want to know this information. I want to know how we're doing. I want to know how it's trending. I want to know how the programs are being effective, and we do have measurements, and we've gone over them extensively, repeatedly, asking what are we measuring, what do we consider to be success, and how are we measuring it and when, and all of these wonderful things. But yeah, I just don't think that from a governor's perspective I need it framed this program versus necessarily this program.
Trustee Swanky?
Thank you, Chair. I do have an amendment that I've provided to staff. If it can be brought up, I'm happy to seek a seconder. Apologies, Chair. Did you want me to reread the? Okay.
Sorry, I didn't notice you hadn't pushed the button.
Nope. Thank you, Chair. I would move that the motion be amended to read that the strategic plan renewal process include a review of student achievement data that looks at the impact of targeted literacy intervention for elementary students. I'd seek a seconder and a ruling of the Chair if the amendment is in order.
Sorry, it is in order and it is seconded by Trustee Reed. Trustee Swanky?
Thank you, Chair. In my mind, this addresses a few things. I think both this and the previous motion, I had concerns about the clarity of intent of the proposed action. I had concerns that there was identical rationales presented for both. And as has been identified, to what extent are we looking for data on operational matters that are in isolation from other considerations? I would also add that it's not necessarily actionable at the level at which the board operates. The intention of this is to acknowledge that we'll be engaging in a process of strategic plan renewal next year, that we want to consider what the academic supports are that we want to celebrate and promote in recognizing that we need to be doing better by elementary age students and middle school students. It's not meant to be exclusive, but for these purposes, it's looking at where is their targeted literacy intervention, what is the data and the other data points that need to be considered, and then making sure that's incorporated in our renewal process next year.
Okay, trustees, we're now speaking to this amendment, which has been moved and seconded. Does anyone want to speak to the amendment? I saw trustee, okay, I'm gonna make notes so I don't forget. Westerby, Reed, and Bondar have all put their hand up, and I'll call on you in that order so you don't have to keep pushing your button. Trustee Westerby.
I really appreciate the presentation of this amendment. I doubted that the amendment could be made, but I was wrong. And I think that this definitely targets what it is that we've been discussing and I believe would be the best way to get this data presented to us in a way that informs our governance. And I appreciate the amendment brought forward and speak in favor.
Trustee Reed?
Yeah, I would just like to state that assuages any hesitations I had with the previous motion and also satisfies the need for data. And I think that it would really inform our governance lens and the role that we play in the district.
I don't doubt that the amendment makes sense, but I don't think it is necessary. I don't think any of this is necessary. I feel like the assistant superintendents and our literacy team and our early years team has the job of deciding the best reports for us to see. I don't think that we need to decide that. That's just my view.
May I address that?
Trustee Swanky, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair, and please consider this speaking for the second time. I think the member is absolutely right. This does not necessarily need to come from the board. I actually would have entire confidence in staff that this would be incorporated in it. I am trying to do right by the fact that there's a member that's wanting to draw attention to data, and so I'm trying to balance the desire for them to be heard at this table with the desire to support the work of staff, and so hence it's not meant to be overly prescriptive and it's not meant to be limiting in the data that's being looked upon.
Trustee Moss?
Well, first of all, I don't really think that this is an amendment. This is actually a motion by substitution because this is something entirely different. I was asking for comparatives. This is actually asking for information that we already get. If this is asking for it to be more specified, so how the students that are struggling are doing, are we tracking those students? If that's what the intent of this is, then that's fine. But this is not an amendment. This is a whole different motion.
Trustee Moss, I guess I have a question for you. So I'm prepared to vote for this amendment and vote for this then amended motion. But I also agree with Trustee Bondar and Trustee Swanky that it's not necessary. So what I'm asking you is, do you care about this motion at all? Because if you don't like the amendment, I will vote against the amendment and vote against the motion. Yeah.
I care about every single motion that crosses this table that has to do with data concerning reading and math scores in our school district.
Okay, so
I'm not finished. Okay. Children depend on us at this table to be paying attention. don't roll your eyes, Trustee Bondar. Oh, boy.
Yes,
This
yes.
is- this is no
Wait, hold
point
on.
of
There was a point of order called.
What? She's
No, you called a point of order. She called a point of order. You can't call people out for talking to you directly and then do the same thing.
I didn't hear her say point of order.
Did just now.
Oh, my gosh. Kill me now. Oh.
Okay.
Did you say yes?
No, I said, my goodness.
Oh, I thought you said yes.
Asima, you haven't, I guess, really addressed my concern because I am happy with just defeating the original motion because I don't think it's necessary. I felt that this amendment was sort of helping get some of the data you wanted, but if you don't like this amendment, I'm happy with just forgetting this amendment. So I would just like some clarity on that because the only reason I would vote for this, the amendment, is to somewhat give you what I think you're asking for. But if you don't like the amendment, I'm happy to vote against the amendment. So I just would like some clarity from you on that because I don't know which way I should vote now.
I have a question for staff. How is this motion going to provide us with different information than we already get concerning students who are struggling in reading and math? Does this give us the information that we need? Obviously, it's not comparable, which is what I was originally asking for, but does this give us information about students who are struggling to read and do math in our schools?
Okay, so I think that there's no mention of math in this amended motion, so the math piece wouldn't be helpful. I think that we talked earlier about the work we're doing around analyzing our elementary literacy collaboration project. I think that as part of that larger, like we're doing a deep dive on that. We could put some historical information in there that shows from whence we came, which I think may be helpful. And looking at what you're asking for, I feel that this current motion gives us a fair bit of latitude in interpreting what we're going to be bringing to the board, and I think that we could expand that report that we do to include the pieces that we're hearing tonight. Like, I'm comfortable with making that happen as part of our research and expanding it, and I think that in some ways it's not necessarily a bad thing to show some historical pieces. Like I mentioned earlier, when it comes to the PM benchmark reading assessment, it is the same assessment, so we would be at least comparing those students reading from 10 years ago to today.
This motion also asks specifically intervention. This motion also asks specifically intervention, which may be different information than's been presented in the past, right? Because now the focus is on those students who are receiving intervention.
Right, tier 2 and
Tier
tier
2,
3.
yeah. So that may be helpful, Trustee Moss.
Yeah.
I think the word impact is one that the research that Dr. Savage is talking about will really highlight. So whether it's in this motion or it's coming, I think that's the commitment that that really deep look. But that word is meaningful and is really connected to the research that we're going to be doing.
Can we do a friendly amendment and add the word math in there?
I'm amenable to that. I think that was just an accident that it got left out because that wasn't the original thing. So I think if everyone is okay with it, rather than moving an amendment to the amendment, we will just add literacy, targeted literacy and numeracy intervention, please. Everybody, don't make us debate that. Okay.
As long as it's a friendly math report. Let's get friendly math report.
Yeah. Okay, so if we can put literacy and numeracy intervention, that would be great. And then that, I think, okay. Okay, so All those in favor of amending the motion to say that the strategic plan renewal process include a review of student achievement data that looks at the impact of targeted literacy and numeracy intervention for elementary students? All those in favor of the amendment? Opposed? Okay, motion carries. And so now this is the motion. Does anyone want to speak to this now amended motion before we vote on the motion that is now before? Trustee Westerby.
It's more just a question of clarity in how much time and effort would be put into this additionally, and if that's something that is budgeted for, like if it's a significant increase in effort, which I would hope not since it's data we already have. I just really want to make sure that we're being financially responsible in asking for this additional work.
Clarify if I'm wrong, but I feel like a lot of this is already collected data. It would just be collected in a slightly different way and then specifically attached to the strategic planning. But if it's actually way more extensive than I think, that would be helpful information to know.
Just to provide some clarity, what we have coming up at the April public meeting is a 90-day cycle, the second iteration of that. These things do take time. And then something more specifically would be the numeracy intervention for elementary school students. That is extra on top of what we have been doing for the targeted literacy intervention. It's going to take a bit of time to be thoughtful. It's good information to have. Requires our existing teachers and our coordinates to be able to go out and collect that information. So you're right, it's extra work, but it's worthwhile to bring this back. It'll also help us with our FESA report for September. When will this be due by? That's the next coming question. It's going to take us a bit of time, so I'm going to say month of May, the May public meeting, or June.
I mean, for me, my clarity, it says that the strategic plan renewal process. So I believe as we're going into the new strategic plan that we would be looking. So it's like 4 years. This is next year.
Thank you.
Potentially.
My apologies. I didn't see that piece. That works well.
I'm just gonna say that I now would vote for this. I think that if we actually don't currently collect any data on whether an intervention works, we probably should. So I think this is probably a good thing to be doing, and it gives staff enough time to present that as a report if we're not doing it until we're going into the next strategic plan. So I think it's doable and also important. So I'm in favor now.
Thank you, Chair. Question through the chair to Rohan. Rohan, would this information be available that Heather is requesting? Would that be at your fingertips? Could this be in a request just internally outside of our meetings?
I have to go back and actually, I can't answer the question because I have to connect with the data manager looking at a database, especially the pre-information around PM schools at that particular time where they reside. So I can't give you a definite answer. Having said all of that, if you do have it, we'll be happy to produce it.
Okay, trustees, not seeing any further comments. All those in favor that the strategic plan renewal process include a review of student achievement data that looks at the impact of targeted literacy and numeracy intervention for elementary students. All those in favor? Opposed? All right, motion carries. Thank you. All right, so meeting summaries are in the package. We're moving on to public participation, same rules as before. Comments or questions concerning the agenda that we have just gone through.
Thank you. Dana Burton, parent, teacher, very passionate about literacy and numeracy rates. In regards to the two action items brought forward by Trustee Moz, I'd like the board to consider that after the pandemic, which interrupted both reconfiguration and the changes to reading intervention, there's been many changes to student learning, both mental health, loss of in-person instruction for a variety of reasons, including but not all within the student or within school control, such as public health measures put in place, children staying home due to illness, which in the past they might have come to school if they had the sniffles, but now if parents are doing due diligence, they're keeping them home, as well as families being really concerned and hyper diligent. And we've had an extreme change in our absenteeism. I can be the best reading teacher, but if kids are not physically in my room, I can't help them. So I'd really like you to consider that when you're looking at pre and post data on those two particular events that have affected the district in a really strong manner. I love data. I spend most of my day either doing data collection or analyzing data collection. I'm proficient in all elementary mandatory assessments in this district from K to 5, as well as having my level B certification to do further testing. Today alone, I did a CCAT, which is a gifted test for a young student. I did a letter ID on a child that's at risk, as well as 2 p.m. benchmarks, and that was just today. So I know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about literacy, numeracy, and data. I would put it out there to the board members that are at the table. There is a specialized reading program. I teach it. You are welcome to reach out to me by phone call or email. It's a program that we created at our site. I've been teaching it since at least 2018. I couldn't go back through my emails far enough to figure out how long. 4 days a week, 3 hours a day in our building with our students. 2 hours of that are directed just at literacy instruction, and it works.
Thank you so much.
Contact me.
Thank you so much.
My name is Dr. Darrell Ferguson. So happy to be here, starting my clock. I'm going to finish my comment that I didn't finish before. I'm so thankful that this board has decided to discuss the role of the superintendent publicly. So I will. I am going to refer back to Community Relations, point 9-1. Superintendent must establish good relations with parents and caregivers. Given the fact that the superintendent wrote this piece, it is also public knowledge, was sent out with a very, shall we say, statement that brought nerves to, I'm going to refer to the superintendent's
We're not going to
performance.
talk about the superintendent's presentation from last time, and he was presenting on a presentation that the
Hey, let me
board
say this.
received. We're not.
The superintendent
We're not doing this.
needs to.
My name's Linda D'Armani, and it'd be nice for this meeting to end, number one. That'd be good. But it'd be nice if the superintendent would have his talk before we finish public participation. And I thank you.
I already answered that question the last time you asked it.
I can provide some clarity. The reason why I bring a report to a board meeting, which is held in public, it's not a public board meeting, is to provide context to the public from a notion of transparency, to support the work does to support the strategic planning process. It is not a staff report to the public. Having said that, I always welcome any parent to call me up and have a conversation with the center about whatever topic and around district policies. That's around the transparency that was referred to prior to. I think that's super important by itself, but this is not the forum for that. So the reason I bring it back, and I'm going to be talking about the McCrae study, is to inform the public about the work the board is doing. in triangulating the data, which is referred to, in being able to make informed decisions to advance the goals of the strategic plan.
Thank you, Superintendent.
Hello, my name is Darren Ollinger. A couple quick questions, or rather, one point of notion is that in order to get meaningful analysis results, the data structures and algorithms have to be in place. So when we're looking for a specific kind of result, we need to ask specific kind of questions, and that forethought that goes into the process of recording the data or in order to analyze it, it is better done before rather than after, trying to dig through a mine of meaningless data when we know we should be looking for something more specific. The other one that I was wondering about was policy 503. I'm not sure exactly what was voted to be repealed on. Is it the police presence in the school, or is it if you could provide me with one or two sentences that briefly describes what had been defeated by that motion, please.
So if you go, when you get home, if you look at online at the package, there used to be a policy
503.
Yeah, so there used to be a policy that was very short. It was a couple sentences that
I
said.
asked Heather, and she said the whole policy would be wiped out, but I'm just wondering what that meant.
Yeah, so I'm trying to answer. So there was a policy that was very short that just said, I don't have it in front of me, but it was short. You could look at it in the package. That has been repealed, so there isn't a board policy anymore, but there's a very extensive administrative procedure that principals and the district staff follow. So there's a more fulsome
The question that I wanted to ask was like, can the student who's being interrogated choose their designated guardian, whether it be a teacher or their parents or someone else they trust, because they can either trust the law, fear the law, or despise the law, depending on the nature of their bringing up at home.
Yeah, so,
and they might want to use someone else other than their parents. Do they have the ability to choose their guardian?
Yes, your time's up, so I'm just going to answer that. So go home, look at the board package. The administrative procedure is in there. It's very detailed. So basically, students are not generally to be interrogated at school. That's the first sentence. Like, generally, that's not
a reason why.
Sorry, can I finish?
Go ahead.
Okay. So if you read the package and you read the administrative procedure, generally students are just not to be interrogated at school, period. Okay? We don't want the police coming in and interrogating our students. But there are some instances where a child is at risk, or there's like a very emergent reason where the kid has to be asked questions at school for some reason. In most cases, their parent would be called immediately to come and be their parent and be with them. And so in most cases, it would be their parent. If for some reason it can't be their parent, then the principal would stand in loco parentis. So you can read the whole admin procedure. It's in the package. Yes, that's in the admin procedure. You can go home and read the whole thing.
Dr. Daryl Ferguson. You know, I just want to say I really have appreciated all these folks I've worked with for 4 years, and the hard work in math and English, and they do a great job. I would like to make a proposal, because in the 4 years that I attended graduations, I never saw one math scholarship or English scholarship.
Sorry,
Now,
with respect, it's not on the agenda.
I'm affirming the whole process of discussing.
It's not on the agenda.
Wonderful
No, it's lovely.
and
It's lovely, but it's not on the
math.
agenda. Thanks.
Point of order, Chair, I would expect that the presenter would understand the Roberts rules that he's followed for the last 4 years. I'm kind of confused as to why he doesn't seem to understand the rules we presented clearly.
Yeah, it's a bit confusing to me as well, Trustee Westery, but. The 15-minute public participation period is over. Okay, so we are moving on to superintendent's update. Short, sweet.
All right, I've got a 40-minute presentation, so it is pretty extensive.
The superintendent evaluation just went down.
All right, just on a serious note, and I know that this is part of the agenda. And
Sorry, excuse me, Superintendent. I would respectfully ask, if you're not going to be participating, you need to leave the room because you're currently interrupting our meeting.
Apologies, I thought it was over. It is not.
Yeah, well, have I said adjourned? No, I haven't. Please leave the room or be quiet. Thank you.
All right, thank you. So really, and I'm mindful of the time, and I'm just going to do a quick summary. You actually have all of this information that I presented the last 3 memos really quickly, and I think what I'm going to be doing is covering some of the key pieces of information. So you have the raw data. I'm just doing a quick summary between the Chilliwack results and the provincial results. I haven't triangulated the information with MDI, with the YDI. That's the next step. We just met with Fraser Health on Friday, it's just the starting of the conversation. Again, it's not quite straightforward to correlate the data because of the fact that the information is confidential, but you can actually collect some themes. So I'm going to run through it as fast as I can to get some information and hopefully make some sense of it. And trustees, if you have questions beyond this, I'm happy to, and I'm going to have the presentation linked to my memo, but welcome to ask me some questions right through. So this is the 7th wave. As you know, Chilliwack has taken part in 3 other waves, 2013, 2018, and 2023. Has a profound, so 59 school districts participated. Some important statistics from that. 55 chose parental notification and student consent. We chose the same format too. That actually increases the sample size for consideration. So then realistic of the target sample, they looked at the number of students. So in Chilliwack was grade 7 to 12. They chose some specific classes, approximately 10% of the population. That was the number of classrooms that were randomly selected for the provincial sample. So just some good information I have. It's also, if you create the link of my report, you can actually access the Mercury report of the public website. So our survey, so really it talks about the whole notion of when it was approved. So October 5th, 2022, a copy of the survey was sent to the trustees at that particular point. Then on October 11th, the Board of Education approved the motion for the district to participate. It was extremely important to get that particular piece done. And then, as I said, the approved motion supported parental notification and student consent participation. It's been done for the last 3 waves as part of Chilliwack, and this is the 3rd consideration for Chilliwack. Really quickly for our results, there are many I can cover through. You have all the information with you. I'm just going to cover some key things that I thought was super important to highlight. Profile, physical health, mental health and well-being, substance use, and relationships. I think the last one is what's fundamentally really important for us to consider. So information-wise, those are the ones. These are a whole bunch of data tables for consideration. So in Chilliwack, for 91% of the students in Chilliwack, the gender identity matched their sex assigned at birth. Most students identified their sexual orientation as straight. In the province, was 94%. 94% of the youth, the gender identity matched their sex assigned at birth. Just interesting statistics. Again, it's a sample size of the province. It's a sample size of the students in the Chilliwack School District. The next one to quickly talk about is the profile ethnic background. So a high percentage of Europeans live in Chilliwack compared to the province. And also a high percentage of Indigenous students live in Chilliwack compared to the province. And I guess then it's a consideration for you. The next big one that came up would be is that the profile racial identity. So larger percentage of white as a racial identity were identified in Chilliwack compared to the provincial sample. And then a larger percentage of Asians in the provincial sample size were identified compared to Chilliwack. So just things that pop up that are considered. Going through the next one was religious affiliation. This was the very first time this question was asked from the survey by itself. So Chilliwack has a higher percentage of Christians in its sample size compared to the province. The next one coming through was how youth rated their health, the sleep, their health, sleep considerations, health conditions, and disabilities injuries and access to healthcare, which again is important for Chilliwack. So the first one would be is physical health. How youth rated their health by itself. Majority of the students in Chilliwack rated their health as good or excellent. Same thing with the province. However, in the province, a positive rating decreased over the past decade from 87% in 2013 to 73% in 2023, which I don't think we are surprised by. Interesting statistics as to why and what are the antecedents. Next one would be sleep. Again, in so in Chilliwack, it just talks about the statistics. Hours that students slept the night before completing the survey. Small sample size. In the province, the night before completing the survey, 42% of the youth had slept for at least 8 hours, compared to Chilliwack, was only 24%. So again, bit of data we have to triangulate with the MDI to ascertain as to are kids getting sufficient sleep. Interesting statistics to pull out from that particular piece. The next one will be physical health, health conditions and disabilities. In Chilliwack, when asked about any health conditions and disabilities, students most commonly reported to having a mental health condition. That wasn't in the province. In the province, the percentage who reported having a long-term chronic medical condition continued to decrease, while the percentage who reported having a learning disability doubled. Another interesting statistics to consider. So that was, and the next one would be physical health and injuries by itself. So in Chilliwack, in the past 12 months, 33% of the students had been injured seriously enough to require medical attention. And also 18% had experienced one or more concussions where they had lost consciousness, or were dazed, confused, or suffered a gap in memory during this time period. In the province, in the past 12 months, 33% of the youth had been injured seriously enough to need medical attention. And then 15% of the youth had experienced concussion in the past 12 months. So it's really neat to compare the statistics, regardless of the sample size, and really ask some key questions as to why. Physical health, access to health care. So in Chilliwack, past 12 months, the majority of the students had not needed medical treatment, specifically because they were physically sick or hurt. Among those who needed medical help, 83% had received the treatment they needed and 17% had not. In the province, in the past 12 months, 23% of the youth had not needed to access health care. However, 3% reported they had not been able to get the care they needed. And that was a decrease from 4% in 2018 when it came to access to health care. The next big piece would be how youth rated their mental health, which was very important, self-harm and suicidality, and access to mental health services. So the next one will be, so in Chilliwack, most of the youth rated their mental health as good or excellent. That's both province and ST33. However, from the provincial statistics, there was a decrease in positive mental health ratings over the past decade, from 81% in 2013 to 73% in 2018 to 60% in 2023. And positive mental health is more than an absence of mental illness, definition-wise, such as anxiety and depression. Positive mental health is a state of well-being in which every individual can cope with life in general. So just out of a definition piece, so it makes some sense as you're looking at the data. Just going through the data one more time. The next one is mental health and well-being, self-harm, and suicidality. So in Chilliwack, this is students in ST33 were asked about the various forms of self-harm. In total, 25% had cut or injured themselves on purpose in the past 12 months without the intention of killing themselves, including 18% who had done so on multiple occasions. The past 12 months, 19% of ST33 students had seriously considered killing themselves, and 5% had attempted suicide. In the province, in the past, 24% of youth in the province had cut or injured themselves on the purpose of trying to kill themselves. The percentage of who self-harmed increased over the past decade. 15% had self-harmed in 2013 to 17% in 2018. Students in grades 7 to 9 in the province were generally more likely to have self-harmed than students in grades 10 to 12. That was from the provincial statistics. Mental health and well-being, access to mental health services. So in the last 12 months, 65% of the students in Chilliwack had not felt they had needed mental health services. 15% were able to access the services they needed, and 20% did not access the services they needed. and students offered a variety of reasons for that. Looking at the province, that's the province statistics, and again, you can access this information online. 71% of the youth in the province felt they had not needed mental health services, while 11% were able to access the services they needed, and 18% did not get the services they felt they needed. So there's a gap there when it comes to accessing mental health services, which perhaps is not a surprise in the conversations. The last big piece before the relationship piece would be vaping, smoking, alcohol, cannabis, and reasons for using and consequences. Running through a couple of quick charts for you. In Chilliwack, 30% of the students had ever vaped. Around half of the students who had tried vaping had not vaped in the past 30 days. And then looking at the province, pretty similar too. Overall, 26% of the youth had ever vaped. They most commonly had their first vape at the age 13, and just over a quarter vaped for the very first time at age 15 or older. It's a bit of a consideration, and I know that in our schools there is an increased number of youth that engage in vaping, so that's a trend across the province. Something for us to keep an eye on and continue to find focus on. Smoking, substance use smoking. Locally, 15% of students had smoked tobacco, excluding ceremonial tobacco. That's in Chilliwack. Some statistics there. I'm going to go to the province really quickly. Despite the decrease over time in the percentage of youth who had smoked tobacco, which is a good trend for the province, youth who did smoke were more likely to have first smoked at age 12 or younger. It's a bit of a consideration there in the statistics. Alcohol. Students, so this is basically in Chilliwack, students were more likely to have tried alcohol than to have smoked or vaped, as 42% of the students had ever drank alcohol, beyond just trying a few sips. Province, just under 4 in 10 youth had tried alcohol, beyond a few sips, which was lower than at any point in the last 30 years. Those who had tried alcohol most commonly first did so at age 14, which is a good consideration and trend. Cannabis, Chilliwack, 25% of the students had ever used cannabis. Among those who used cannabis, 33% used it on Saturday before taking the survey. And in the province, really quickly, compared to 5 years earlier, there was a slight increase in youth who used cannabis for the first time at age 12 or younger, and a decrease in the percentage who waited until they were 15 years or older to try it. That's in the province. This just talks about the substance use, reasons for using. Lots of good information there. You can actually see it on the presentation. I'm going to just jump to the last section really quickly. Substance use consequences. Pretty important particular piece here. Around 2/3 of students in Chilliwack had not used alcohol or other substances. So negative consequences. I'm looking at the consequences. And over half of those who had used substances did not report any negative consequences. Province, similar to, over half of the youth who had used substances in the past 12 months did not report any negative consequences. The most commonly reported consequence was being told they did something they could not remember, which is concerning. This is the biggest piece, and I'll then finish off the presentation. Friendship, supportive adults, family connectedness, and school connectedness. I'm going to encourage you to look at the report. It's a lot of good information for consideration, but this actually connects to all the previous presentations we talked about. Really some quick statistics, right? When asked, in Chilliwack, when asked if they got along with people around them, 73% of the students agreed. Friendships, most students had at least one close friend in their school or neighborhood. And 68% had 3 or more such friends also, which is really crucial. And then with the comparative, we're looking at from the provincial context, compared to the 5 years earlier, youth were less likely to have in-person friends and more likely to have online friends, which probably is not a surprise. Finishing off, relationships and close connections. Youth were asked about the roles that adults played in the roles. Really important, and so 73% had at least one adult in their neighborhood or community who they felt cared about them. Super important. I think adult connections, MDI also talks about it. Province also had 73% had at least one adult in their neighborhood or community outside of their family and school who they felt cared about them. And about half of them had about 3 or more adults that cared about them. And I'm just going to skip the next one, relationship, family connection. But here's a big slide by itself, and I think this is super important. These are the assets for school connectedness. We all know, we've talked about it in the last previous report, students and their well-being are the center of the entire K-12 system. We have to do everything we can to connect kids. This ties back to the AP we talked about, about having an adult they can care about who can actually sit in if they're going to be interviewed by MCFD or police by itself. So these are the different assets it talks about. A whole notion of positive mental health, engagement in healthy behaviors, improve academic achievement, improve school attendance, higher school completion rates. So all increased school connectedness is linked to those particular pieces, as well as belonging. And then collectively, all of us carry the responsibility of creating the safe space so kids are connected. And that is research-based, and we have to continue to do that to support kids. Last but not least, some comments from kids when they finish a survey in Chilliwack. I want to get more help with exercise. Another kid, family issues. Third student, mental health, and little things I can do to improve it. Getting more mental health supports that are more well known or announced. I want to help with my confidence a tiny bit. Being in the 2S LGBTQIA community has definitely affected my mental health, and I wish we learned more about it. One other student, mainly Christian people who are also LGBTQ+. Trustees, thank you. I'm not going to ask you for questions. This is going to be online, and you can also look at the weekend updates from the last 3 weekends.
Trustee Miles?
So I had previously asked for that report, like for a link to that report, and you said that you had already provided us with the information that we needed, but not the full report. So is this the full report that you're sending us to the link for?
I've given you all of the information in my last 2 weekend memos leading up to it. It's in there for you. And so when you ask me the question, this is probably half the report because of the time consideration. So you have the information.
So we have the whole report,
Correct.
the whole report.
You have the whole report in my memo from the last 2 weekends.
So we don't have the whole report.
I'm gonna repeat myself. You have the whole report in your memos from the last 2 weekends that I sent to you. You have all of the relevant information.
Relevant, there's the word. Okay, thank you.
All right, the next board meeting is April 16th, 2024 at 5:30. This meeting is now adjourned.
9:20.